Yeah, look, we thank you, Deputy Mayor S. So we have a batting order for the 8 issues that we have outstanding, 9 issues actually. We're going to start with O for Omanu, and Gareth is going to talk to that.
So the future use of Omanu is part of the work that Ross Hudson is doing in the Strategy and Growth team in terms of the future network for amenity community facility that will bring to the long-term plan. Between now and then, there'll be no commitments to what we use the space for, and just keen to bring that decision back to you guys as part of a broader decision on the use and how we develop our community assets. No decision and no money.
Yeah.
Is that a community engaged process, that process for Omanu in general, not just obviously the...
It's first looking at overall networks, and then at a later stage you'll go, where do you need to engage and what would you be engaging on? So we're not quite there yet. It's a bit of a stock take and understanding of how the network operates. Sorry, Gareth.
Thank you.
So the second issue is the sum of $70,000 that was...
I just have one more question, sorry, around the bowling club, sorry. If that just lies now, then what happens to the greens and everything? And, does it just start getting weeds and stuff? Or what happens between now and then in that bowling club space?
I'll need to check with Mark's team, but I'm not sure that we've even actually wrapped up the lease arrangements with the bowling club. So the last time I heard about it, we were still kind of dotting the I's and crossing the T's in terms of them getting out of their commitment to the building. So I'll follow that up and can come back to you on that.
Thanks.
Yeah, look, as an interim thing, we can perhaps report or update you through one of the PSOC committee meetings before that other piece of work's completed.
Quickly, did they have synthetic turf over there at the bowling club?
I don't know, but we'll pick that up as part of that PSOC report. So the next item is the $70,000 museum consensus funding.
So on that one, we thought we might use some of that for the master plan. Gone back and had another check. There is $177,000 there for the civic precinct master planning work. Because you haven't done your workshop, you don't know what you want to do yet, we haven't got direction. We don't know whether that will be too much or not enough. So you could, ignoring the 70. So if you assume that we have that 177, if it ends up that we need more, depending on your decisions, you could approve unbudgeted expenditure, and then you could use the 70,000 for cultural or other purposes. Effectively, you either allocate it to cultural as a carry forward, or you let the carry forward lapse, and then it increases the amount of surplus that's available.
So moved by Councillor Robson, seconded by Councillor Arbery. Would you like to speak to it?
I just think, I'm feeling quite good about the amount we've started to put in this area and the things we've started to address, and I think about things like Monmouth, I think about things like, I keep calling it Bruce Farthing's initiative, but people know what I mean. I haven't quite got a label for it yet. And I think we need to recognise sometimes when some things are at a natural end and we need to restart them in a more considered, structured, strategic way. I think in this case, this carry forward needs to fall back in the pot.
Councillor Arbery.
No comment, thanks.
Councillor Hughes, did you want to speak to this? No. Councillor Cloud.
Yeah, I think anything that assists our surplus for this year, which we can then decide if we can utilise that to offset some of our rates increase for this year. I think that everything that we can do to increase that is a good thing.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak to it?
Only
I'm not going to speak because I'm just only managing to keep the tears back. So
Councillor Robertson, did you want a right of reply? So we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Abstentions? Carried. Thank you.
This one is...
sorry, the chair needs to change because the mayor's in the thing.
Do you want me to keep rolling with them? So then the next one is the Mount Vic, which was parked in terms of the CapEx list. So in your agenda, it's on page 36 and it's line number 400. And there was $450,000 in the CapEx budget for the next financial year. And you left it parked.
You said 450 capex in this year. Is it 450 opex?
No, it's 450 capex, but it's
CapEx.
there's also an item in page 37 on the bring forward list, which was left alone on the table as well. You have 450,000 in this year's budget, and you have 4 million in next year's budget on the bring forward list. So page 36 and page 37, respectively.
Really, but do you want to have any funding in the next year's budget to enable further work to happen on the Mountain Visitor Information Centre or not? I mean, that's probably it in a nutshell.
Yes, Councillor Baldock.
Well, just clarifying, we've heard mixed messages. So the 454 in this year's budget, is that OPEX or CAPEX? Because I would think it was something that would have been capitalised eventually within the program.
It's CapEx, it's on page 36.
What's the
Line
OPEX?
item 400.
The OPEX
What's the OPEX
implications of that, please?
So the project wouldn't be capitalised until it would be completed, so you wouldn't have any depreciation or OPEX funding, so it would only be the interest component. So 3.8% of half a year of that. No, less than 10 grand.
Raises the question of whether it's worth pulling out or leaving there.
Relevant in terms of the decision of the entire project and how that works through.
I think it's worth asking Gareth where this is at, because I don't know that necessarily we're in a position to spend that. So.
I'll ask Doug if I don't get anything right, but we've got a couple of small pieces of work on the go. One, to understand what's under the ground in the site, because there's some concerns about services and how that might impact on what we were planning to build. We also undertook some investment logic mapping because we weren't convinced that the solution on the table was necessarily going to solve the problem. Through a relatively thorough ILM process, we feel like we're getting to the point where, you know, there is something that we could do there that would add some value. It's probably different from what was originally envisaged. I'm going to make the assumption that Doug put that amount of money in the budget because that's what he thought he needed this year to continue with the project to get to a point where we'd be able to deliver the following year. I don't know what that 450 encompasses, but Doug might be able to elaborate.
Yeah.
I'll move if I could.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Oh, is Doug here? Doug, sorry, I beg your pardon, I didn't see you there, Doug. Do you want to just give us an update?
Yeah, through the
Thanks.
chair, just that division of funding over those 2 years. The project is significantly behind the program that we signed up for with the provincial development unit through the Provincial Growth Fund. So we're essentially on a program now where the activity in the 21 financial year would be design. It wouldn't be construction, other than maybe some site preparation. So that 450 represents design work with the capital works in the following financial year. So that's why there's that division.
Raises the question of whether it's worth pulling out or leaving there.
Raises the question of whether it's worth pulling out or leaving there.
Well,
Thanks so much, Doug. Councillor Borlock, you've moved this. Thank you. Councillor Arbery.
So just wondering if we don't proceed with this, what the implication is for the growth fund, $1 million that we have, and also if there's scope to reduce the scope of the project so it's not, this big floating roof,
Doug will take that one.
Yeah, the work we've been doing the last few months has been investigating whether it's deliverable, the concept that was indicated in previous meetings, and doing a project health check and some assessment of the concept design. We realised the budget was unlikely to be able to deliver that full scope. That's why we revisited the status of the project and revisited the outcomes, because if we're going through a design process, we'd have to be looking at something different from that picture you saw with the floating roof and such. So the Provincial Growth Fund have been kept up to date with where we're at in doing this kind of project kind of reset. And so they're sitting there with a funding agreement that they're interested as to what the decision is here as to whether we go forward with the design and the scope that we, what the design scope is that we're going ahead with. And we'd have to have a conversation with them after this meeting as to where we land today. But in terms of the scope adjustment, the investment logic mapping basically showed the high-level outcomes you want to achieve from the project. So if there was a scope reduction, you would look at those outcomes you're trying to achieve and adjust the built outcome accordingly to see what you could fit within a budget.
Yeah, your mic's on.
Is that your question, or would you like to have another? Would you like us to have another go at it? The look on your face is it hasn't been answered.
I've got a question.
Yeah, if I'm understanding it right, we're making a decision now to start on a design path with that 450,000, whereas I'd prefer to have the options laid out again and what the outcomes are to make a decision.
Just before we go to Councillor Robson,
So
would it be
I
fair?
don't feel like I have the information at the moment, personally.
Would it be fair to say though the PGF funding will be lost?
Yes.
Councillor Robson.
And this goes back to an earlier discussion. The money that's been spent this year, has that gone through as OPEX or CAPEX? So the money spent on this project, our financial year still ends June 30. The money spent on this project in the last year, the 20 year, was that capitalised or did that go through OPEX? Because I'm just listening to the description of the work and harking back to an earlier conversation about what we can capitalise and what we can't capitalise. And just trying to understand whether this work that was done this year was capitalised or did it flow through OPEX?
It will have flown through OPEX with a view to being capitalised if we actually build something.
Okay, so at the moment it's been recorded as OPEX and we will go back and revise that should something happen. I mean, I've got enough information to not support this. I'm good.
Through you, Your Worship, there is one option in the way we manage this to that if council was of a mind to support the 450,000, we could then, before spending that 450,000, report back to council exactly where we're at, give a full briefing of the range of options, and then at that point provide direction. It is an option.
Which is the option I would like to move, if I may.
Do we have the word, just before we carry on, have we got the words accurately portrayed for your motion?
Are you happy, Larry, that I work with and to get
While this is being drafted, Councillors Arbery and followed by Hughes, followed by Hollis.
So I was just wondering, do you need the full 450 if you're going to come back to us with options that are deliverable, or
no to come back with a paper to give you options, but then if you're going to take those options and do anything with them, to have any chance of retaining the PGF funding and deliver something, yes, we probably need some money there to progress option A through E and whatever's selected. And I guess if no option's selectable, then the money goes back into the pot.
Through the chair, just given the quantum of this, I'd suggest leave it if it's coming back to council, because it's not going to actually hit debt until it's spent. So council has the opportunity to review it at that point.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes, followed by Councillor Hollis. Mike, please.
Sorry, Bill. I guess my question is around, and it might come out in the next report, but then we've got to spend a lot of money on another report possibly. But what happens if we spend this money on an information centre that might have a couple of kind of community aspirations in there, but then does that mean that we don't end up, that we negate the possibility of a community centre for Mount North, or what are the trade-offs that we make on the long term with spending this money on this project as opposed to other projects for that area, or is it completely standalone?
Yeah, look, we're not proposing to spend this money until we report back to council with options and seek further guidance. It's just whether or not we actually include it in our budget or not. If we don't include it in our budget, my sense is the $1 million or the 900 essentially we will lose. Whereas for the sake of perhaps 2 months and it being in our budget, despite the fact that it won't be spent, we may have the opportunity to retain and to deliver something worthwhile there.
Thanks.
I'm happy with what's up there, retain the 450 in the CapEx program for the thing, for the reasons that have been explained. We're not, and if I have a seconder, I'll second that. So,
Let's go to Councillor Hollis, I think.
sorry, didn't mean to.
Oh, I see. Very good. So we've got a proposer, the resolution in green, approved by the, and Councillor Clout, you're seconding. Thank you. Councillor Bordon.
In a sense, it's only needed because we were looking at pulling it out. But just to make it clear, this keeps it in. It's just this isn't the right time to make a decision about pulling that project altogether. It was an LTP discussion, and it should be an LTP discussion, or sometime this year when you give us an issues and options progress come back, because it may morph into some other things that we consider still to be valuable and may still hold on to that $1 million that was there with some renegotiation. We don't know. But given the way it sits in the program, it's not something that's going to give us lots of savings right now for addressing what's on the whiteboard, if I understand what we've been clearly told, because ultimately or currently in this budget coming forward, it is CapEx, not OpEx, and so we're only saving interest, which I think worked out at about 14,000. So part of what we're doing here is trying to get to a setting of a rate. And that project, while it has a long history, and I understand some people have been wanting to stop it from day one or day two, it's still something we should keep going until we are clearer on what is in the best interests of everybody involved. The tourism industry returning, the cruise ships revisiting eventually, and not taking an action today that is premature.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clout. Anyone else? Councillor Morris, followed by Councillor Arbery.
I don't support it because I simply have the view that if you or if I am not committed to something, then it's not worth spending the time and the money investigating it. And I think that was the big lesson from the Civic Heart project, where $6 million was essentially wasted on investigating proposals which came to naught. And so with the Mount Visitor Information Centre, I am not committed to the project. I don't think we should be spending any more time or money on it in a time when we're entering the third decade of the 21st century. So it needs to stop now. And we need to focus on more important issues.
Thank you very much. Councillor Arbery.
Yeah, I think I'm supportive of keeping it in there for the time being, and then when we have options, making the decision then, largely, yeah, to keep that $1 million subsidy by central government alive. I think, yeah, it'd be a bit hard to give that away without just exploring the issue, and then looking after. Once we look at the options, we can decide whether we want to spend the $400,000 actually designing this thing, or whether we cut our losses at 50 grand of investigations or whatever the case may be in 6 months' time. And I do think there'd be a good case to argue with the Provincial Growth Fund that with COVID and cruise ships not coming, the immediate need for this visitor centre isn't there now, so can they extend the funding for a couple of years so that the tourism industry can recover. The immediate need for this isn't there, but I do see a need, and it probably doesn't need to be $4 million, I don't think, but something there so that when people come off the cruise ships, or when people come and visit the Mount, they get told that there's a Manawa Falls that they can visit. I think leave it in, make the decision on the $400,000 in 6 months' time.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kitty.
Thank you. I just think we have so many things that we've got to focus on. The Mount Maunganui community, I can't speak for them all, but I think they would have, or would be really keen to have something to say about what could be done instead of spending $4.45 million on an information centre that is only for the tourists that do come off. There are other options that have been put out over the submission period. I'm going to talk to John's daughter's teacher. I think it was a Bruce Farthing. I think Buddy McIdy was here, and there may have been a lady, I think her name was Sonia, whoever she was a beautiful speaker, but they talked about a heritage trail. They talked about what was happening in Waipa. That seems to be something that not only tourists could use, but also local people could use. Something like that would be what I would want to be spending money on, okay, instead of a visitor information centre that I do believe is outdated. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Salisbury, followed by Councillor Robson.
I'm in support of this because I also agree that it gives us the opportunity, especially those of us that are new and don't necessarily understand the history of this project, it gives us the opportunity to understand what the current project is, and then also in light of that, I agree with Yako there that we can perhaps maintain the funding opportunity while we look at potentially rescoping it in light of lockdown and tourism. But I think with all the wonderful tourist things that we are going to be developing over time, it will be great to have some form of centre for people to come to, whatever that might look like. So I'm in support of this.
Thank you very much. Councillor Robson.
With your indulgence, Chair, just a quick question. If the staff are to bring a paper on this to us, there will be OPEX involved in the delivery of that paper. If it's a genuine exploration of issues and options around a visitor information centre, there will be a certain amount of OPEX. If it's a issues and options paper around the broader thing, including the sort of Farthing model and whatever else, it will be a significantly bigger piece of work that needs to come to us. What do we have in mind as that OPEX? Because that is clearly OPEX. What is the size of that OPEX figure, roughly?
Through the chair, excuse me, we've actually largely done the piece of work. So we've completed an investment logic mapping exercise with a wide variety of stakeholders, and pretty much have got to a place where we've got some options. So you're really just talking about some staff time to pull things together and come back to you with some ideas for next steps.
Okay. Speaking to the substantive motion, thank you for that. Speaking to the substantive motion, I'm in Councillor Morris's camp. I'm a great believer that you shouldn't spend time exploring things that you've got no intention of committing to, and I can't, for the life of me, see myself committing to $4.5 million for some sort of visitor information centre. I know there's been a lot of discussion around this project. I think it's a little kete that's carrying a basket of people's aspirations, and it's being used as a sort of catch-all, And I think that's a really messy way to approach significant amounts of CapEx spending. I go back to my earlier request, and I'm really disappointed that we couldn't commit in a way that I wanted us to commit around Omanu. I can't support this motion. I think we are, it's just not playing straight. And I go back to finally to my comment. If Shane Jones heard the logic being advanced for keeping this in, it would be out. I think the million's gone. Frankly, chasing the million, spending 4.5 or 3.5 to chase a million is like buying a coat you don't need, right? Because you're getting 20% off. It's bonkers.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes, followed by Deputy Salisbury.
I don't know enough about what the community parts of this are. If it's all about an information centre, then, but I'd like to be able to have the opportunity to actually, I don't know much about the project at all, to see what the cultural elements and the community elements and how that might be able to be adjusted to swing more in that direction or less, or how the project could come down. So I'm keen to just have that presentation and keep it in there for that to be able to happen from my perspective.
Thank you very much. Deputy Mayor Salisbury.
I just have a quick question. Is that PGF funding contingent on the actual value of the project? If we were to rescope it or change the value or drop it, is the funding still available?
It was quite a specific agreement with the PGF with instalments based on a design and a program. We're at least a year outside of that program, and if we go back talking about a different scope, I imagine they may invite renegotiating the terms as to what they're investing in and if they're investing in it. So we keep regular contact with them as we go through this process, and but we are significantly outside of the terms of the agreement at the moment.
Before I go to Councillor Morris, I will. I think it's a really salient comment. Do you want to?
Yeah, I think the PGF fund have been very tolerant with us on this one, and the commitment that we signed up to initially we weren't able to commit to, and there has been a renegotiation on this, and my sense is that even that renegotiation we would find it very difficult to deliver on the timeframes if we were to revisit and change the scope of the project, which essentially has been proposed. That again would be another renegotiation with the PGF fund. It does feel as if we're sort of trying to hang on to this, and we haven't really quite worked out what it is we're trying to achieve. And so, it might be, that's I think a fair assumption of the way that this has unfolded.
Just through the chair, I think we could make that part of the report we bring back in a couple of months a clear understanding of where the government's at in terms of ongoing support for the variety of options we put up.
Thanks, Gareth and Marty. Councillor Morris.
Thank you. Just for clarity, the $1 million granted was essentially for the roof, an iconic roof of a building that was designed. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Clout.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I can see very little downside in us leaving this in the budget because we've already, as it's already been explained, there's very little impact on OPEX for this to remain in. I take the point that quite a few of the elected members are quite new to this project and don't have the background that other ones that have been in previous training have had. We all know that it's more than just a holder of brochures, as someone mentioned the other day. There's significant more sort of boxes that will tick, and so I think all those elements need to be brought forward in that report. As Gareth said, the work has largely been done, so I don't see the report being a big OPEX exercise.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hollis.
thinking about the right words. It feels like the hand-wringing that we're doing here is similar to what got us to 5.5 or 6 million for the base track and another 6 million for the civic centre. And goodness knows, however, many other projects that spent a lot of time mucking around in the weeds like this. And I think we need to pull the pin. We can always restart a project to build an information centre.
Councillor Arbery, followed by Councillor Bulldog.
Just a question, sorry. So if, I might have missed it. So if we come to the options and decide we do want to proceed, we can add it back in as unbudgeted expenditure. And I just wondered if, the Provincial Growth Fund is dependent on it specifically being in our budget or not.
Yes, it can be added in through council resolution, and Gareth can talk to the growth fund.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any specific requirement that means we have to have it in there to keep the PGF funding alive. Not that I know of.
No, although I think it would be prudent that we advise them.
Thank you very much, everybody. Councillor Bulldog, thank you.
Yeah, I think if we take it out now, I think you'd be finishing with the PGF funding. But it's not all about that funding. It's about a project that was started, and I appreciate the comments made by Councillor Morris and Councillor Robson that, if you don't believe in something, don't start it. Well, this was started back in 2015-16, and it was us building our building there that would be leased by Bay of Plenty Tourism. It since has become quite a beast, but I think it's premature, as I said earlier, to take it out. We think we can trade things. Oh, we could use that money for something else. That's just not how it works. Every project has to go through consultation and be approved. So if we take it out today, that doesn't mean we've got money available for something else. In fact, in terms of the decisions today, the OPEX available will be very minimal. It is important that we keep it in right now and we go through a process and that we all get the right information. We have the issues and options before we make a final decision. We went through it through the LTP. It was a considerable item of discussion and debate, and that's where we should come back to if we don't make a decision with the issues and option paper that comes forward. We have a $1 billion industry in the city called tourism, and they do have to have connection points. We have 400,000 visitors come to the city through the port, and they could benefit by having somewhere they go to very close by. We've had difficulties with this project because the land we thought it would go on has complications and so on. But let's let the experts sitting around us come back to us with these proposals they're already working on, and then let's make the decision. And not send the wrong signals right now, again perhaps, that we are finishing something off prematurely. Let it have its course and have the decision made based on intelligent and considered information. Who knows that the PGF fund, they've already been tolerant, but they do understand the situation. When the cruise ship industry stopped, it had a huge impact. Surely they are aware of that, and they will be in consideration of delays involved in the project. But no one's suggesting we're going to go and build what was originally designed. It will go through a process of change, and we can all be part of the decision making in that when we let this paper come back to us. So please, keep it alive at the moment. It won't take long.
Thank you very much. I think everybody's spoken. I'll put the vote to you, Councillor. All those in favour, please say aye. It's the retention of the funding, Heidi.
Basically what that means, once a budget is approved, the CEO's got delegation to incur it, expend it and to proceed. What you're doing here is you're withholding that delegation to the CEO and you're putting another gateway of approval in before that money can be spent.
All those in favour, please say aye. Can I see just a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm number 6. And all those against, 5. Yep, thank you very much. The motion is carried to retain it in the form that is described.
There's related under the bring forward list, there's $4.5 million of bring forward, so all of that was the carry forward, wasn't it? So we would suggest that you move that out of the bring forward list, and then that's a separate resolution that you could pass at that time when you get the issues and options paper, should you wish to do so. Again, all that's doing is just removing the Chief Executive's delegation and bringing it back for you.
Very much, Christine. I think are we doing fireworks now? Oh. Beg your pardon. Great, thank you very much. Moved by Deputy Mayor Salisbury, seconded by Councillor Robson. Any discussion from anyone? Councillor Robson? Councillor Bulldog? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Abstentions, and carried. Thank you very much.
So next is New Year's Eve. So you would have received an email from Gareth at 8:06 this morning. That was from the Park Whiteboard of cost components that could be potentially removed. So you need to make a decision as to whether you want to retain. So it's on page 1 of your green sheet, down the bottom, G2.
Through the chair, there's a wide plethora of options available to you, really, which does make things difficult. The original staff suggestion was to pull all of the funds other than $50,000 needed for enhanced city operations to support the police, in particular in Mount North and the CBD on New Year's Eve. The easiest other option is to leave it all in. Everything in between is obviously up for grabs, but it all comes with complications and parts of our community missing out and things like that. But that's, I guess, your decision to make, but I'm here to answer questions.
So Hughes, followed by Councillor Robson, I think, followed by Councillors Kitty and Arbery.
Have we explored options for sponsorship and support from private businesses, etc.? Like the port, for instance, might want to blow off some firecrackers on a go-out barge?
Not recently, and we don't retain event sponsorship specialty resource within the council. We used to pay someone a considerable amount of money to do that, and their annual salary was offset with about a $15,000 net gain in terms of sponsorship, so it just wasn't worth continuing. So we could try, but we don't really have people sitting around that have that specialist skill that could then go, okay, well, I'll go and give that a go.
Thank you. Councillor Robson.
Just looking at the email sent and the projected 2020 numbers, I'm just trying to understand what's driven those numbers. For instance, Mātua, a forecast increase of 20%, Greaton, a forecast increase of 100%, Tauranga CBD, no change. What's the science, or is it more of an art in this case? And I appreciate that there's probably a degree of art in it. But if someone could give me a little bit more on how we arrived at those numbers, because in terms of choosing locations, it's quite important.
Yes, it's definitely an art as opposed to a science, but based on the ground feel at the events, and I guess listening to the communities and observing the popularity of the event. The Greaton one, for example, was brand new last year, and I don't think the community knew about it as much as they will after having held one successful event, which is why we're predicting that we'll double the numbers. We tried to remove the CBD event last year because from staff's point of view, what we've been trying to do is create community events and negate the need for people to have to travel too far to go and hang out with their neighbours on New Year's Eve. And I guess at the moment, the CBD is not really a community. There's not many people that live here. And based on what we've seen over the last couple of years, then we're kind of at critical mass in terms of the number of people that seem to want to come down to the CBD on New Year's Eve, which again is why that we haven't assumed that number will go up. But fundamentally, it's a gut feel exercise.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kitty.
And this probably will be directed at you as well, Gareth. I'm aware of a community group that are in Mount Maunganui at the moment that are looking to do something over a 3-day period in Mount Maunganui. They've got some great ideas, as I'm sure everyone does. They have been liaising with the council. I think they're preparing to come and bring you a video, actually, which I'm really excited to see. So they've done a lot of work in this area. How open to us partnering up with them would we be, because there could be opportunity for, like Heidi said, some private funding going on there as well?
We've got no set plans for what that community event at Mount Maunganui is or could be right now. We've looked at a couple of potential locations. The initial plan was just to roll out a similar version of what currently happens at Papamoa and Mātua and in the CBD, but we'd be more than up for a conversation about something that the local community thinks would work for them.
Supplementary, really excited about that, and wait till you see the video.
Thank you very much. Councillor Arbery, followed by Councillor Bordock and Councillor Hughes.
This isn't a question, but if we do end up reducing this budget, just a request that we don't get into the detail of which events we cut now, and maybe make that decision later at a workshop.
Mr. Bordock.
Excellent idea. The midnight fireworks at 5 locations, 40,000, seems to me light given, what you're letting off. But am I right to assume that it's because you've already got all the setup there anyway, that it's easy just to let off the fireworks? And that on their own the cost would go up a lot more?
Yes, there are economies of scale, but for example, I left the event delivery budget at 30k, and if we only delivered one community event, that would probably come down, and I'd take that money and chuck it in to New Year's Eve midnight fireworks to account for the fact that we weren't, so I'd allowed for some economies of scale and some synergies in terms of stuff. It's ballpark, but yes, it would. If you did New Year's Eve fireworks at midnight on its own, it would cost more than $40,000.
Second question, if I may. Is it reasonable if we proposed a resolution that shaved 100,000 off, but left all the locations and asked you to investigate sponsorship and other things and so on? Is that something you could actually work with and still deliver a reasonable New Year's Eve experience, both for families earlier on and for the midnight attendees? There's no point us moving something that's not practically workable.
I guess my only concern about that is our contractor that delivers New Year's Eve starts in 2 weeks. So there's not really a lot of time up our sleeve from taking our wide stakeholder group on the journey with us to get together and have a workshop and see if we can raise some money, which then might influence how many events we can actually do. The clock is pretty much up on this one, and we, to be honest, I think we really just need a decision today to say, this is how much money we've got to spend, and this is where we want to invest it, and we'll go away and make it happen.
Final supplementary. If we left the figure at what it is, but said we instruct you to pursue whatever sponsorship might be available and so on, we can still do that within the 6 months that are still available, can we? To see what we can find to reduce the cost overall.
Yeah, we can give it a go. Like I said before, I'm not sure who I would give that task to. I would probably actually just hire someone on a casual basis to chuck a couple of funding applications together and give it a nudge, and they might be successful, they might not, but we'd be happy to do that.
Thank you, Gareth. I've got Councillors Hughes, followed by Councillor Clout. And Councillor Arbery again? Kitty, I'm sorry.
I'd like to move that we leave $150,000 as available as a funding option for communities who want to put on their own events, and X the rest. I just believe that we've I'm not speaking in that. 150,000 So 150,000 available as a fund for people to access as a co-fund for New Year's Eve events around the city as a contestable fund.
Yeah, safety is
Your Worship, should this lapse for want of a seconder, I'm happy to move a motion.
Thank you. I just wonder if you could just finish with the questions of clarification, which I suspect is still coming.
Well, actually, I mean, you've just said that it can't work for safety, but that's part of an event plan for a group that want to put something together. But I guess from my perspective, I'd like to see that 5.37 start to drop, and I can't see in this year how 10 minutes of firecrackers, it's just in this year, it just doesn't seem, it seems like this is a place where we could make it really clear that we're bringing it back in the following year, but we're listening to our ratepayers to say that maybe if there's local things that want to go on, this is the year that people gather together and do their own stuff locally, and allow some businesses, etc., to do their own. But maybe we had a little grant in there to help support community groups that wanted to put on local events, whether or not they're involving firecrackers.
Can I just pause that? I just want to go to Councillors Clout and Kitty, and then we'll wind back, if I may, because we may learn something as a consequence.
Thank you. I mean, I was going to propose a total of 250,000, but just picking up on Councillor Hughes's idea, the 150,000 for community-based events, therefore it's not a council-owned, controlled event. Presumably there's still council costs on New Year's Eve. So if there's 150 for community events, what would be council's costs above that? Because it may end up being close to my 250,000, just think.
We need to retain a minimum of 50 for what we call enhanced city operations. So that's basically supporting the police at Mount North and in the CBD. We do a couple of road closures. We add some additional cleaning. We do a variety of measures to kind of mitigate some known issues on New Year's Eve. It's fair to say that 4 years ago, I think we spent just under $300,000 on enhanced city operations. So we've been working over 3 or 4 years with the police, and as the behaviour and the culture of New Year's Eve in the city has changed, we've needed to spend less, and it's coming down every year, but we would retain $50,000 for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It might be a total of 200,000, and I believe Councillor Granger was seconding.
He was prepared to second.
Did you second?
Councillor Hughes's motion. Can we just hear from Councillor Kitty first, please? So, Councillor Hughes, you're proposing what exactly, so we can just hear it?
Well, I'd like some more discussion around it, because I've just kind of plucked it out of the air. In terms of, so the intention of this really is to allow communities the opportunity to do their own thing, and so if that was to be supported by a fund, then they would be able to do that, and it would give us more money in our coffers.
Just so I'm clear, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but are you saying a fund that could be managed for all these the events of this sort, under letting the team, have... It's
a fund that for events such as the Mount local events, that they would be able to access maybe $40,000 and then run their own event, co-fund the remaining...
Contestable fund?
Can we just hear from Councillor Robson, then we'll go on into this.
Through the chair, we do have the event funding framework, which has money available for anyone on any given day of the year that wants to run an event. So the group that Dawn are talking about don't necessarily need this bucket of New Year's Eve money to make to help support what they're trying to do and make it happen, but they have to go through a normal process to apply for those funds, and we have an event funding panel subject to the size and scale of money thereafter.
I think we were down here actually with Councillor Granger. You were prepared to second That okay. Yeah, I think Councillor Morris was before you. He has a question too, as I understand.
No, I'm happy to speak to it when it's...
Oh, okay. Councillor Bullock.
I think we asked this before, Gareth, but just to clarify again, if all the fireworks were taken out of the New Year's Eve event, but the community activities were run by us, people gathered, had music, had sausage sizzles and whatever, what is the saving then? What is the amount of the fireworks? Because people could bring their own, maybe, and let them off together. What is the fireworks component of it all, please?
We are
a couple of things there. One, I have a feeling the police would have some concerns about the public bringing their own fireworks to a community event. The total cost of fireworks for all of the 9:30 launches and all of the midnight launches and all of the associated barge costs, etc. I'm going to say 85k. Further to that, and as I put in my email, I would suggest the predominant and overwhelming driver for people coming to the community events is so that their 5-year-old kids can see fireworks at 9:30. And if you took those fireworks away, I think that you would find, we might have a lovely community event, but it'd be 400 people, not 2,500, because the fireworks is what gets them out of the house for a couple of hours.
Supplementary then, are you suggesting that the midnight fireworks could be taken away?
Absolutely, that's your choice. But
Councillor,
yeah, you absolutely could take the midnight fireworks away. I just the way we've built it kind of, I guess, works, and in a lot of people's minds, it would be strange to have fireworks at 9:30 p.m. on New Year's Eve and not at midnight.
We are right in the weeds here. Councillor Robson. Does anybody else wish to speak on this? Otherwise, I'm going to put the motion to you. Yes, Bill, you go.
Hey, thanks. Look, 2 or 3 points that Heidi mentioned. Number one is we're trying to do the best we can to get that figure down, and that I think this will help for me to look at $450,000 plus for such a short time. I don't think is right. And it was just the other day I was thinking, what sort of money could you put forward? And funnily enough, Heidi, that figure sort of clicked my mind as well. And I think personally, as regards to other events funding figures where people can grab it, and a good example of that is we did one in Welcome Bay about 3 to 4 years ago where the community centre actually got hold. I think they worked with, I could be wrong, so I've got to be careful here, I think it was with the Lions group that helped, and they supported and put so much capital forward for a fireworks display out at Welcome Bay. It went really, really well. So, like Heidi said, when you open it up, and there is others out there that may want to come on board, I think it's a fantastic idea. So, yeah, I think that figure that we mentioned is roundabout right, and I just feel that we've certainly got to start, and I hope it does get supported.
Thank you, Bill. Just before we go to Steve, Gareth, you had a point.
Yeah, I guess I can't speak on behalf of the New Zealand Police because they're not here, but knowing their concerns about what happens on New Year's Eve in the city, I think that they would be relatively cautious about this as an idea. The way things run at the moment, we have professional event organisers running New Year's Eve activities across the city, and as much as I love this concept, the work that we would have to do to get our stakeholder group across the line for people applying that may not necessarily have any event delivery experience, and they may do, which would be cool. I guess I'm just putting some caution there in terms of it's a noble idea. I think we would run into some roadblocks with the New Zealand police in particular, but not to say that we couldn't make it happen. I feel like I need to say that.
Thank you very much, Gareth. Councillor Morris.
Thank you. I only speak because it may help inform a subsequent resolution, but look, what's proposed, in my personal view, is incredibly lame. We're a city of 140,000 people, forecasting nearly 15,000 people enjoying these events on New Year's Eve, families, kids. If we start hacking away at this, every other thing that's been put into the budget is going to be held hostage to it by families come New Year's Eve time. I can see them now walking down my street saying, gee, thanks for employing that overly paid environmental consultant to recommend that we put grass on our roofs, and thanks for cancelling the fireworks in order to make room to do that. So, seriously guys, this is just lame. Let's not be wowsers.
Thank you very much. Councillor Baldock, last comment, if I may.
Last comment? This is we're speaking now to the motion, aren't we? Sorry. We are, yeah, so it will be my last on this one, but I agree with Councillor Morris. I think what we shouldn't be doing is looking at that figure on the board and making our decision about how we try and affect that, because we will affect it, we will look at it, and we'll do what we can about all that. But if this had been debated yesterday, we in our generous spirit then would have probably passed it. What we need to do is have a resolution that says we're only going to do it properly with the whole amount that our staff have told us they need to do a proper citywide thing and everyone enjoy it. Maybe by New Year's of this year, COVID may be, making us all miserable, and we're thankful that we can have something to celebrate, or things are going well and it's, let's go on and forget the misery of this year. So I think the right resolution is either yes or can the whole thing, no, and then we can make a decision and move on. Personally,
Thank you very much. Councillor Clout.
Yeah, I appreciate the nobility of the mover and seconder as well. It's a great idea. It doesn't really go far enough either, because we know we've got at least another 50,000. So if we were going to pass this, we'd need to incorporate an amendment to add in the other 50,000. But I'm expecting this will probably lose, so we won't go down that track. And then we'll have a discussion about a subsequent resolution, I believe. Thank you.
Kitty, followed by Councillor Robson.
I'm just going to kind of back up what Gareth said. I have had a meeting with Clifford a couple of years ago, Andrew and I did, and as much as I love what Heidi's doing, because our little panel that have got together, events panel, would like to have access, some of that would be great, but it was a really hard job, and Clifford sat down. I think we had about 6 of us in that meeting. I stand to be corrected here in the council, and it was incredibly hard to be able to do anything privately. Unfortunately, it was near on impossible. So, yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Kitty, Councillor Robson.
Yeah, look, I can't support this motion. I look forward to this motion failing and having the opportunity to move a motion that I believe will move the city forward.
Good. That being the case, may I put the motion to you? Who's right to reply? Heidi.
I'd just like to say I won't be endorsing this motion. I think this is a ridiculous idea.
Can we do it just for fun anyway? Can I put it to you just for... We've got to do something with it. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Not carried. Councillor Robson, over to you. I think it was 1-4, as I think we saw.
Look, it's good to laugh, and look, I really appreciate the sense of humour that Councillor Hughes brought to that situation. It leavened the things significantly. I would like to move that the New Year's Eve event funding budget be $494,000. No, actually be $400,000. And if I have a second, I will speak to it. Obviously, it's up for amendment. Speaking to it, there is a requirement to. it's a matter of understanding. I think staff have given us pretty clear direction that if we do this, it has to be done at the scale and with a level of professionalism that actually delivers an event. In terms of the numbers, I think the numbers understate the impact. As someone who is often at home because I need to be if my partner is out, fireworks in the sky you can see. I remember it in Swansea many years ago with my young daughter, being able to look out there and see fireworks over the city. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. If we're going to do this, let's do it properly. The idea of, the reduction we've had in the, the city operations for that night, one of the reasons we've had a reduction is the community have had something to go to and something to enjoy and celebrate in a really positive way. And if you take that away, people will make their own fun, and sometimes some parts of our community, the fun they make doesn't consider the interests and wishes of others. This is not about 5 minutes of fireworks for 15,000 people. This is about a city celebrating a significant milestone in its calendar. It's about us embracing a new year. It's about us looking forward with hope. It's about us actually uniting around something that's pretty apolitical, non-political, universal. It's a celebration in many ways of our humanity. Can we just do this, please?
Very good. Thank you very much, Councillor Robson. Seconded by Councillor Hollis. Thank you.
I agree that it is an enormous cultural event that we've been doing since Gregory invented the months and put them into their particularly useful order for us. I think that at the end of this particular year, we're going to want to celebrate bloody hard that I intend to have more than my fair share of red wine and enjoy a bundle of my own fireworks, as well as watching the cities go off.
Councillor Clout, followed by Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, look, I've always enjoyed the New Year's celebrations that we've put on as a council. However, I think in the spirit of trying to get that number down a little bit, I certainly do not favour 400,000. I'd be more inclined to go for something like 250,000. So if this fails, I'll be wanting to put that as a resolution. So I'll be voting against this 400,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock, followed by Councillor Granger.
It won't fail, Councillor Clout, because I'm agreeing with Councillor Robson. And you know what happens when that occurs. We're really thrilled that we've moved the city on, and it's been a lot of hard work from a lot of people, from being a place where people came to create havoc on New Year's Eve to a place where families now are bold enough and safe enough to move out into their communities, not all congregate in one place, but move into little communities and enjoy New Year's Eve together. And it's a good investment. But I will make this point, and I hope you'll listen. This is why submissions are not a numbers game, because actually 63% said, no, we don't want you to do this. It's our job sometimes to sit here and think about the future and what life might be like and make plans for that. And this is the right thing to do. Let's plan for this celebration. Who knows how good that may make everybody feel about this horrible year many have had to go through. Thank
you very much. Councillor Granger.
Hey, thank you, Chair. Look, I'm bewildered here, listening to all these comments come out. Councillor Robson, fireworks in the sky you can see. Kaboom! Few seconds, it's gone. And I often get that phone call saying, what a waste of my money you're spending. Just think of that, Councillor Robson. And Councillor Baldock, good investment. Again, I get people ring me up. Is this a good investment? Oh, I don't think so. So, I'm sorry, you guys. I'm sticking to what I said before, even though I got thrown under the bus a little bit. It's just that, you just imagine the number of our community out there that when they know you've spent that amount of money for so little, and you say, yes, it's something we need to do, I think There's other ways we can do that, and I mentioned it before, and there is. So, myself, certainly not supporting this. Thank you for listening.
So Hughes.
Yeah, it's I'm up for a good party, but I guess something's got to give somewhere along the line, and everything has consequences. And in this year, there'll be consequences to going for a big bang party on New Year's Eve, and what that looks like. So I'm going to abstain here and just let this ride out, because there's a lot of people that want that rate up there to drop. I'm okay with that rate not dropping if everyone wants to party on New Year's. So I'll abstain and let the team decide.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the motion? Would you like?
Yeah, look, I appreciate this, but the truth is that people that want to hang a rates number on a single issue or a single topic are being disingenuous. Our spend this year will be in the order of $276 million. Some of the decisions we're making are imposing a rates burden for 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, some close to 100 years rates burden on this city. So I urge people to think broadly and widely and inclusively when they think about these things. And one last point, right? Taking lessons in profligacy from a man who has a toy Corvette, a real Corvette as a toy, is just a little bit tough. I wish that I was so privileged.
Very good. Thank you for that. And on that that note, I'll put it to you, Council. All those in favour, please say aye. And can I see a show of hands? Thanks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm 7. And against? Thank you very much. Councillor Robson, your mic is on. Oh, and one abstention. Thank you. So 3 against, 1 abstention.
Just a point of clarification. Sorry, CJ. So that's great, but we can't deliver what we delivered last year for that amount of money. So I would suggest that one community event needs to come out. And if that decision's left to staff, I can pretty much guarantee that if we decide it's Papamoa, that community is going to put up their arms and run to Steve and Dawn and say, hey, what about us? And if we choose the CBD, a variety of people are going to run to whoever. And I personally think that it should be an elected member decision in terms of which community misses out, because the budget's been reduced by $94,000.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, can I just suggest, though, we talk about this rather than debate it here?
Yeah.
If it does come to that, but yes, of course, Tina.
My question would be, even though it's not in any of our things that we just decided, is there still a possibility of seeking corporate sponsorship for the fireworks component, which would leave enough funds for the rest of it?
Yeah, like I said before, we can try. Yep.
Yeah, I'm happy to try.
There's no community event in Welcome Bay.
Councillor Morris,
Just thinking, in terms of the Mount, there is an aspiration to have a community event there which is largely funded by the community, hopefully. In terms of Tauranga CBD, that's maxing out 2,500. In terms of Greerton, that's new. I'm seeking some advice, not seeking a decision from staff, but seeking some advice. If you were delegated $400,000 and you were making the decision, well, which one would, no, let me phrase that differently. Let me phrase that completely differently. Yeah, you can report back maybe what you'd do. Yeah.
Can I ask staff to give us some options around that?
We can have a workshop on it.
Moving on, folks, to Christine, where are we at?
Yep.
next item is the economic development. So there is a resolution on the table that was moved and seconded but not put because there was a procedural motion to leave it lie. So we have to go back to that. It's on page 3 of the green sheets, X1, and it's page 22 and 25. So if Robin can maybe pull back up the previous resolution that we had, which is here. So there was a resolution put for, can we go back up a little bit higher, Robert, just to show what actually happened during the meeting? So the one that was put and lost, option 1 was put and lost, which was provided another additional 130, which is the same as what was consulted on in the draft annual plan, that was put and lost. Then there was option 2, which is not included, which would be 130,000 reduction to the economic development rate. And then there was an amendment put around the ecosystem, and then that was left lie on the table. So we still have to go back to that motion.
So just to be clear, should we be focusing on option 2, which is not to include the 130?
That would be a good place to start.
Can we find out what's currently included in there? Like, is the 130 included in the 5.37 or out? It's in, so if we took it out, it would lower that number. Just clarifying.
It's in as per the draft, yeah.
Okay.
Bearing in mind it's a targeted rate against the businesses.
Well, can we hear from the mover of the amendment whether they're still requiring to go?
Councillor Robson.
In my view, some procedural guidance here. We had an amendment proposed that was then left to lay on the table. So the topic itself lays on the table by definition, but the amendment laid on the table, and there was some seeking of clarity about what that amendment might result in. Given how much money stroke time we've just spent discussing the fireworks topic, and while a little bit of levity is a good thing, probably more than was needed, I'd seek the indulgence of the chair for us to perhaps through some questions of staff explore the options that we're looking at here a little bit further in terms of the appropriateness of this motion, particularly in the light of the fact that we haven't decided what the funding of P1 will be, as far as I can tell, based on that recording.
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. Look, if councillors wished that we brought a report back to council to explore the current environment of economic development across the Western Bay of Plenty or Tauranga, then we could do that potentially as part of leading into the long-term plan process that might help inform investment by council over the next 10 years. And that would simply be a report seeking guidance about what level and what detail of review council would want to help inform their investment through the long-term plan process. If councillors and the mover and seconder were comfortable with that approach, then potentially if you were to withdraw that, then we could go back to the option and address the option.
And I'm happy to, with the support of the seconder, I'm happy to withdraw that, but I have an alternative motion I would like to move.
Happy to accept that.
Thank you.
If the seconder is.
In which case, what I'd like to move with regard to the subject that's now risen from the table is that the funding for P1 for the following year be reduced by $75,000. And I'll speak to it if I get a seconder.
Just a point of order.
Yep.
Can we just confirm we're understanding what you're asking for? So there's that 130, so you're asking to reduce from that 130 take 75, or you're asking for the 130 to come out and a further 75? I'm not clear.
The 130 was, we said no to the 130. Have we not?
No, one was lost.
It was lost 4-7.
So what,
The 130 was voted on, it was lost 4-7.
So then what you're asking for is of the existing budget, excluding that, a further 75, yeah.
Yeah, if I can be clear what my thinking is and then be corrected by staff as appropriately, but preferably not with anything too solid, that we voted on the proposed additional 130, that was lost 4-7. We then looked at voting on option 2, and then there was an amendment put to option 2, resulted in significant discussion and overnight pause, the subject laying on the table. So my question is a procedural one really. If we withdraw the amendment, what is the motion that's on the table? And I'm happy to move an amendment to that motion, depending on what that motion is. Because I think the motion, that option 2 motion, doesn't actually take us forward in terms of addressing one particular issue.
So assuming what just happened there, that the amendment was withdrawn, then option 2 is the matter that continues to lie on the table for discussion.
Okay. And
if you wish to move an amendment, or someone else does, that's up to the chair to manage, or someone else.
So just bearing in mind that most of us have already spoken to option 2, so we can maybe hear this amendment and speak to it then.
Yeah, just for
Sorry.
a surety, maybe somebody else could make an amendment if you're not happy with that one, just in case we... Yep, okay, all right.
And the motion currently on the table is moved Arbery, seconded Hollis, and that is not include an additional 130,000 for economic development investment, i.e. reduce budget by 130. It's for me it doesn't go far enough because the 130 is a net figure. So what's in the draft AP is effectively an increase of 130. We voted not to increase it by 130. I believe it should be reduced by 205. So my amendment is effectively to change the figure from 130 to effectively not include an additional 130 for economic development and remove the 75 for, I think it's international or whatever, with an effective reduction in budget of 205,000. And I'll speak to it if I get a seconder.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Morris.
So speaking to it, there's an amount that P1 get annually. In the light of COVID, with best intent, they've come to us and said, we think you should give us another $130,000. As a matter of fact, we think you should give us another $205,000, but the $75,000 we've already budgeted, we don't think makes sense to spend. We've rejected the request, the net request for the 130, but I believe the 75 is still in play, and I believe there is a use for that in other places, and I'm thinking about some of the stuff we've already spent in cultural areas and whatever. So all I'm suggesting is we just accept their budget application, but take the 75 out. I just think it makes sense. So that's the motivation behind it. They don't need that 75. In their own words, they don't need that 75.
Thank you. Councillor Morris.
Yes, and if it would help clarify things for colleagues, it's on page 23 of your agenda at the bottom of the table, the international strategy, where they have removed that as non-essential. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, I think it's in Councillor Robson's words that they don't need it. What they did was a reprioritisation of their budget and came up with that 75 and then said, having saved that 75, if we had another 130, we could then do some more things that may help COVID recovery. If we approve this amendment, we will be one of the first councils, I think, in the country that are reducing their economic development budget. I think we signed off on P1's budget earlier, and to reduce it now just makes no sense whatsoever. They know what to do with this money. They may be able to achieve some of what they were proposing with that 130. With that 75, they have reprioritised because the international side of things has fallen off. So, look, I certainly won't support this amendment. It makes no sense at all. And I hope we think carefully about it before we vote on it. All we needed to do here was go back to the motion, which was needed because of the lost first motion, and then get on with the other things here today, not try and pull money out of P1's budget.
Thank you. Just speaking from the chair, I won't be supporting the amendment and agree with Councillor Baldock that we've seen government doing their level best to stimulate the economy through subsidies of all sorts that we all know about with small business and individuals and what have you. And I just agree with Councillor Baldock that we're in desperate need of economic stimulation, and I think P1 do a very good job at it, and I like the idea of their composition, the way they've been composed from the private sector in partnership with local government. So I won't be supporting it. Councillor Clout.
Yeah, I won't be supporting the amendment. I was one of the 4, I think it was, that voted to include the 130. So to go reverse in a larger scale, that does not line up with my original desire. So I'll be not voting for the amendment, and then if the amendment's lost, we'll just obviously vote on the substantive motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kitty, followed by Councillor Arbery.
Am I right that between obviously the Tauranga City Council and businesses in the area, P1 get 2.1 million? Would that be correct already? And they're wanting added investment on top of that. Is that correct? Jeremy,
yeah, I haven't got it in front of me right now, but that was very, very close to the number I looked at yesterday. Yes.
Councillor Arbery.
So speaking to it quickly, I mean, to be fair, council asked them for options for economic development, and Priority 1 did offer or did show where they could reduce some of their budget in that international space. So that 75,000 was identified for them, but I'd be inclined to reject this and stick with the not changing the budget, so that way it's I suppose not reducing their funding, and they can reprioritise that extra 75,000 that they've found in their business as they see fit for whatever they think is the highest priority. Although I do understand the argument that council took a very hard look at its own books and reduced expenditure by $10 million on the OPEX side, and some of our CCOs haven't achieved some of those partner organisations haven't achieved the same thing. So I do understand the other side of the argument, but I will be voting against this particular amendment.
Thank you very much. Is there any, Councillor Kitty, were you wishing to speak on this? No? Yeah, you did. Sorry. So I'll put, if there's no other speakers to the amendment, I'll put Councillor Robson, do you want to write a reply at all? You know, on this? Okay, thank you. All those in favour of the amendment, please say aye. 5 and against. 6. 5. The amendment is lost, which takes us to the substantive. I'll just make sure Robin's.
Councillor Arbery. Oh, it's already up. Yeah. Councillor Arbery.
So speaking to the substantive motion, I've just had a request that we change the motion to say that we leave priority one's funding unchanged. So it's just a wording change, but I don't think it's with the what's the word, the time and the, so there's no difference in outcome. So I mean, speaking to it briefly, I think this is not taking a step backwards, so just keeping it the same, and then they can find the lowest hanging fruit in their portfolio to pursue.
Councillor Arbery. Councillor Robson.
Question, is there actually no change? So there's no CPI increase or anything? We're talking about exactly the same number year to year? That seems to be the implication of the speech
There
by the
normally
movement.
is a CPI adjustment.
Again, I haven't got that. I have to go back into Ozone and it's broken today apparently, so I can't go back and find that out.
Our reliable system is down.
Should-
Normally we have a CPI adjustment, but CPI is very low this year. So
Should we say as originally budgeted?
It's just if there's a argument given to support a motion, that argument should be grounded in some sort of reality. I think it's quite important. If there's no change from last year, I may well support that.
I think, Tracy, have you got the answer there?
So has that amendment been moved, or we're still with the original substantive, which is that the 130 be declined? Is that correct?
Yep. Option two, as you read it.
I don't know, sorry, Mr Mayor, I still can't get what you want us to call you. You meant to tell us, your worship's crept into the discussion, but I'm not sure we have a record there of who actually spoke already on this substantive motion, but I think the move I thought most of us had. We probably just need to put the motion and let's move on.
I was checking that with Rob, and I think, to my knowledge, everybody has spoken to this originally. There was a question on the floor that I think Tracy is she? No? I think it's in relation to a better understanding of the substantive motion as I understand it. It's around CPI.
So there was a CPI inclusion of 23,000 additional added to the budget.
Very good. Thank you, everybody. I will put this to you. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Abstentions? Carried.
Next one, while you're on a roll of easy topics. Elizabeth Street. So page 34, line 113. It was left lie on the table.
And I'll move that it is left alone.
And I will support that.
Which option
Second
is
that. Yeah, which option are you?
Page.
This is in the capital list, so you're just saying retain in the capital budget as per the schedule, which is line 113 of page 34.
And if I have a seconder. Oh, yeah.
Supporter?
Yeah, we've already had advice from staff that effectively any changes to this would result in about, I think it's 30,000 of OPEX, not to mention delaying the project and not meeting the time requirements, and not to mention the message it sends. So I don't want to speak long. I expect we'll get some of the arguments from those in opposition, and we can't do anything about that, but we've got a lot on the table today still to get through. I just hope we stick with what we plan to do and get on with the reducing of the 5.37 up there by legitimate and sensible means as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Robson.
So all you've got left after this one is the discussion on the funding resource for the caring communities. You've got the the personal expenses issue that you put on the table, and then just to come back to the risk reserve and the surplus. So that's all that's left.
So not too much left. Thank you.
This was a question about a break, I take it. I'm clock watching a little bit. I thought if we could get through this, maybe go and have a cup of tea and then finish off. Speaking
to this, this is a trade-off conversation that I think is really important, and we've made some decisions that I know that on reflection there are people sort of, as you do as you work your way through this process, wondering whether have I made the right call, and it's difficult. So I'm not criticising any individual for the decisions they make. We make decisions, I believe, generally speaking, in good faith, with a view to doing what we believe is best for the city. But I'm also conscious that the swing here is potentially the resourcing that the machine gets. And that machine is the people that do the work, feed the information to us for our decision making, and then execute. I'm also conscious that we've gone out very, very publicly with a figure that I think it will be difficult to resile from. I'm conscious that having made some decisions, most people won't want to revisit them because they want to be accused of flip-flopping. There are only 2 or 3 more decisions to make. But each time we make that decision, we narrow the focus of where we balance. And I think we need to be really conscious of that. Also, what I'm conscious of is that too often our discussions in an annual plan are done with a 12-month horizon, with a rates rise, with an OPEX driver, and they don't proceed in a way that they should, which is a much longer view. I've advocated for and will continue to advocate for, when I get the opportunity, that we should be running 11-year rolling budgets. So when we put something in, we know what the implications are down the line. That point was well made by a number of submitters, that we discuss and determine, make decisions without understanding consequence. I'm minded of a few years back talking to some councillors who are no longer here, who said, we don't know where the debt comes from. And I said, it comes from the decisions you make. There is no other source. In that regard, I struggle with Elizabeth Street. I struggle with its prioritisation. I struggle with the fact the staff could put it higher than Waiari. I'm sure that was done with good intent, but it just goes to show that investment logic mapping, or whatever technique was used, while having an internal discipline, isn't necessarily rational. Because I just can't get there that project's more important than Waiari. And looking at going forward, what I'm conscious of is spending the best part of $11 million, or $8 million if you like. Let's take 8, because the numbers work out really well. Let's take 8, and let's say it's 5% impact on OPEX for the next 30, 40 years. That debt being financed, plus some maintenance costs, plus some refurbs over time. That works out to a very neat $400,000 a year. Exactly the amount of money that I've encouraged, and some members have also encouraged, to put into the ISAB. A framework which I think, if it was in place, would have looked at this project and said, yeah, nah, there are better investments to encourage the ongoing sustainability of the city. And while this project specifically may not affect OPEX over the next 12 months, but in fact it will. Let's not be disingenuous. It's affecting it right now. Every time we talk about it, consumes time and resource. But of course we don't report those or even record those costs. This project, should it go ahead, will effectively cost as much as the ISAB. I just can't, in all conscience, support it. I can, in all conscience, raise at every opportunity the real cost of a project like this and the lack of return. I had the privilege of being invited. How's the clock going, Larry? Good? Yeah. What are we up to? Well, we're nearly there. Thank you. I had the privilege of being invited to a discussion with someone from farmers at their request, and they made it very clear, and I have another colleague who was there, they made it very clear that this is our decision. This is our decision. They said very clearly there is no pressure. You do what you think is right. I hope that partner understands the situation we're in and respects our right to make decisions that serve our community in the long term. We are now, if we go ahead with this project, putting $400,000 a year on the rates. Enough is enough.
Thank you, Councillor Robson. Councillor Arbery.
Yes, I'm just looking at the numbers that we were sent through. So the difference between the consulted do minimum and the other option is $1.469 million in CapEx. And in terms of maintenance savings, that's about $20,000 difference, depreciation $23,000, and interest savings $58,000. So that's $101,000 difference between the two options. Probably the more important thing that stuck out for me was the risk of swapping to another fixed option, of putting the overall program at risk, when what we're trying to do is getting that open at the same time as the farmers' development. And I'm not sure what costs will be put onto us if we have to take over some of that site establishment costs for that delay. So what I'd prefer for us to do is, if rather than reverting to the consulted do minimum option, I think it'd be better if this doesn't get passed, that we add an amendment that says something along the lines of delegates or expect staff to value engineer the solution and look for savings while achieving the program. So that way it's in the staff's hands, and they're actively looking for ways to save money, but not giving direction on a specific design or I think that's probably going to be the lowest risk option to get a bit of savings, but at the same time not cause any big risk. So at the moment I'll probably vote to retain it, but if it does fail, that's the amendment that I would support.
If I could just clarify, because it sounded like Councillor Arbery was going to move an amendment, and the amendment sounded sensible. If he wants to move it, I'm happy to adopt it into the main resolution and not have to wait to see whether this fails, because there's nothing wrong with seeking staff to do value engineering and seek what savings they can.
Thank you. Councillor Arbery.
Clarify that?
I'm happy to move an amendment, and it would say something along the lines of retain the city centre streetscape line item as listed in the revised capital program. Council directs staff to look for opportunities to value engineer the project, delivering an outcome no less than the consulted do minimum on any specific element.
Let's get Robin let her gather her wits on that while Councillor Robson asks a question.
By implication, that suggests that staff haven't value engineered the project that's in front of us. Is that true?
No.
No, we haven't, because not necessarily at that point in time where we are out there working with the preferred tenderers to address those issues.
Supplementary, is that not standard operating procedure to value engineer projects?
I don't. All I will say is that the process will be value engineered if it hasn't been. Okay, so depending where it is in the program. So But of course, we try and value engineer every project. So
I think to Councillor Arbery's point, that we will, of course, during this project, be looking for every opportunity to save money, and this just directs staff to make that a primary focus, but it would have been anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Arbery.
So I'll call this a point of order for personal explanation of the intent. I suppose I can talk to the amendment as well. Hasn't been seconded.
I was happy to adopt it into the substantive if the mover is.
It was. But perhaps the chair would allow the personal explanation.
Yeah, I would like to hear it, actually. I think we all should.
So what this is doing is delegating to staff or indicating to staff that the council isn't, if there's going to be an element that is going to be horrendously expensive to design to hit the, or to deliver the design that we decided on, they have the authority or the delegation to revert that element of the design to the consultant do minimum. So there's a bit of flexibility in the delivery that, you know, we're not deliver the design at all costs. If you can value engineer, if there's going to be cost blowouts, you have the option to land somewhere between the options, is my intent.
Thank you. Councillor Morris. Oh, sorry, beg your pardon.
Oh, just to clarify, in terms of general value engineering, when we apply that, we have a product, you're looking for an outcome, so you value engineer around a set of drawings, for instance, or a specimen design that generates a product. And if I'm hearing you right, Councillor Arbery, the product may actually be a little bit different through this process. So we are given the opportunity to value engineer between the band of two different products. Which just so we clarify this, just in terms of the product, because then if we deliver something different to what was the original intent, there might be some confusion around that, and we have been in that situation before, haven't we, in terms of designing by committee, which kind of paints us into a corner as well. So, yeah,
it's always helpful if we can go into a project with a budget we understand and with a design that has been agreed, and the value engineering process happens around that. If there was to be a major change, I imagine we would report the matter back to council.
It sounds a lot like another project which I'm familiar with, Te Pāpua Ngā Manu Poro Takataka, and the value engineering that occurred there, which then resulted in an outcome which the community and councillors were not satisfied with, and then in this chamber the staff were blamed. So I just put that word of caution out there.
Clarity would be helpful around this. Thank you.
I appreciate the Chief Executive's request. I think the challenge in most of these things is clarity of outcome versus clarity of output. In other words, are you delivering an agreed product, was the word used by Nick Johansson, or are you delivering certain outcomes? And I think that's where, if you like, staff can fall into a hole between politicians, and I don't like the idea that staff wind up in that space. It is horribly unfair. So unless councillors can specify very clearly what output they require and the metrics by which that output will be determined, then you are much safer getting into a product specification space. This is the issue we've had on previous occasions. It's unfair to staff to ask for an output that's not clear, or to ask them to value engineer a product and then complain that they didn't get the product you first saw. There is real risk here for staff and real risk of reputational damage for Tauranga City Council, all of us together, staff and governance.
I'm happy to withdraw.
Thank you.
All right, so we're with the substantive motion then.
So are you speaking?
A right of reply when everyone else has spoken.
Yeah, I mean, we went through this. I believe it was May the 19th, wasn't it? That famous meeting. Or maybe I shouldn't have mentioned it. Sorry about that. Look, we've been through this before. I agree with Councillor Baldock. This is going to do big damage if we try and unwind it now. Sure, there are some legitimate community concerns, but I believe the staff and the contractors in particular will do a very good job at making sure this is a successful project, and there will be some very positive outcomes from this.
Much, Councillor Kitty.
Thank you. I can't see that it can do anything but help our community at this stage. I'm watching the rates level rise over here as we speak. Okay, we had a lot of concern in our community from business owners who did not want this to go ahead because of not only the roadworks, the congestion, the loss of a few parks down there. We've been talking all day about doing the best that we can for our people, about the best that we can for our businesses. The best that we can do for our people is to keep our rates as low as we can and listen to the businesses in downtown Tauranga that do not want that amount of money spent on a boob job and a tummy tuck. It is a streetscape. It is beautiful. If we had a lot of money, I would be so excited about this project. I'd be getting my roller skates down there and I'd be skating myself. But we as a community, we as a town, as a region, we do not have that money. I love the idea, I love the project, but I do not love it in COVID. Again, we have not hit what is about to happen to our community. We have listened to economists, we have listened to bankers, we have listened to financial advisors, we have listened to our community. We have walked the streets and heard what our businesses want, and it is not this. Okay, I just don't understand why we would continue going on with this extraordinary amount of money on cosmetic surgery. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Salisbury.
I've also been speaking to businesses up and down the CBD who are very excited about this project. And I think we have the opportunity to bring some heart and soul back to our CBD for the price of some fireworks, which actually it's just what you want to weigh it up against. So I think this is an incredible opportunity where we're inviting people to partner with us in restoring the heart and soul of our CBD, and I think this is a wonderful investment for decades to come in our city. So I am wholly in support of this.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Granger, did you want to speak to this?
Yeah, thank you. I must admire Councillor Kitty for what she said, and she said that certainly with a little bit of emotion behind it. I'll try and calm myself a little bit more, but I do support her lock, stock and barrel. I just cannot get round my head as regards to $11 million. $3 million here spent for the infrastructure underground, but a further 8 on top of that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not going to put my vote to support something like this. The community, yes, I've heard many people from the community saying, $11 million, Bill? I can't figure it out. I and them, we travel Durham Street. And all I can see every time I travel down there is $10 million in front of my eyes. Was it worth it? I don't honestly know. And I don't really see it, to be honest. But $11 million, you guys, crikey, think about it. Really think about it. It's just... To me, it's just ridiculous. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Otherwise, I'll put the motion to you. Right of reply, I beg your pardon. Thank you.
I'm pleased people are getting an opportunity to speak. And I appreciate Councillor Arbery's intention to try and just get some further assurance there. And I believe staff have worked harder on this project than ever before to avoid some of the things that have happened in the past. There is an enormous amount of risk already budgeted into this, which will be a saving if things go well, and under the ground particularly is where we don't know what's going to happen. So whilst we quote the 11 million and we talk about the 3 million, there is other money there that may actually not need to be spent on this project if things go well. I think if we go down Durham Street in 10 years' time, Bill, with some of your friends or your children or grandchildren, they'll go, wow, just as well the city did this. Wharf Street across here, done in COVID, during COVID. And in a year or two's time, people are going to say, what a great amenity that is down there. People are enjoying it. It was well worth doing. The same will be true with Elizabeth Street. That's why we sit here, to do the things that we know are in the best interests of the city, to incentivise the CBD redevelopment, the people to come and live here, people to come and work here, people to visit here, that we may see a very different CBD. And I hope that we will support leaving this alone and letting it get on with it so that it opens on time with the opening of one of the largest developments in the country that will help to kickstart much further development in the CBD. That is all I'll say. I hope it's the last time we have to debate this issue.
Thank you, Councillor Bullock. Councillors, I'll put this motion to you, that the retention of the city centre streetscape. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against? And the motion is carried. Thank you. Well, let's have a break. It's now, say, 3:25. If we could have, say, 10 minutes and be back here, we've only got a bit to do. Christine, is that correct? Yep, thank you. 3:38. I think we're all back though. So we'll reconvene. Christine, sorry. Oh, I thought he was sitting there. Right, stand by. Good, we're all reassembled. Christine, thank you very much.
So I'll just talk through the last three items so you know what's still to come. So 3 items left. One is around, we've talked a couple of times when you've been looking at individual projects that there's an opportunity in terms of the Caring Communities Fund. So we want to spend a little bit of time on that and seek your views on funding of that. There is still the issue about the, in terms of the operating costs, the personnel line in the overall operating budget. And then there's still lying on the table a resolution in terms of the surplus and what you do with any rate surplus and the issue of the risk reserve. And then obviously sort of rounding all of that out, there's the overview of where you land up altogether in terms of rates. So maybe if I just do a little bit of an introduction and cover all of those topics, because there is some interrelationships amongst them all as you're getting to the end of your discussion. So in terms of the caring community, so as Marty said a couple of times, there is we had received a visit from central government in terms of a number of funding packages that have been identified by the Crown as part of the COVID that have not yet been fully taken up. There are significant opportunities in there in terms of environmental initiatives, potentially for tangata whenua related issues to support tangata whenua initiatives and including employing their people. And we think it would be worthwhile to actually do a comprehensive application that picks up council, but also iwi and hapu, because there's some strong opportunities in there, and brings it together in a similar way that we did the urban growth proposal that we put together, where we put one proposal on behalf of the Smart Growth Partnership in as an integrated package. It seems a significant opportunity to put an integrated package around environmental and tangata whenua opportunities. So the efforts and the number of hours that we had to do to get those original applications was significant. We don't have the resource for that. We need to now be moving on in terms of staff resources onto the LTP. So what we're suggesting is that we should get some external quality resources in. We're suggesting we need 150,000. The quantum of the fund in total is in the billions, so it's not outside the realms of possibilities that we could get in the millions in terms of funding if we pitch together a good application. If we don't, clearly there'll be nothing coming because you've got to get the applications out there. So I'll pause on that one if there's any questions, and I'll carry on to the other couple of topics.
Thanks very much, Christine. Councillor Warlock.
So are the projects that we would be pitching for, are some of them in our program, or are they all in community programs? Could you clarify?
There's be a mix, and we would treat them, I think, the same way as what we would treat if we successfully got any funding from. So some of the initiatives in terms of the CIP and the urban growth agenda are in our budgets, but we've really clearly pitched that we have a restricted fiscal envelope, and we've got more to put into our envelope than we can afford. So if something is supplemented out that just provides more capacity in the next year, when we know for the LTP we're just not going to be able to fit everything into the fiscal envelope. So that's sort of where we've come from, and we would, I think, frame these projects as well. So if you can take something out through this funding, it provides capacity for something else to go in.
It's 150,000 that could deliver bigger savings for us and for the community as well.
Correct. For us, but it clearly needs to be pitched as a whole of community, not just a council, in a similar way that urban growth had to be all of the urban growth councils, not just TCC. There's no more questions on that. I'll just talk through the other ones. So then in terms of the resolution on the surplus, perhaps if Paul wants to talk about where we're sitting in terms of the overall surplus, and then we can talk about where we sit in terms of the rates package.
Yeah, so on the board is prior to the $150,000 where the numbers are actually sitting at 5.26%. So the 150 would take that to 5.34 and a rate commercial number of 11.3 or 1.6% for residential. So in order to bring to reduce those numbers down to below 5%, it would be in the vicinity of $840,000. In terms of the surplus for this year, it's still being worked through. There's still quite a lot of movement around that number. One option would be to allocate a portion of that surplus, recognising, or that estimated surplus, recognising that in the event of that surplus wasn't realised, funding would need to either come from future savings throughout the year, or in the absence of those savings, it would put us into a deficit position, which would be debt funded.
So what we need is direction on that care and communities, whether or not you want to make that $150,000 investment, where you want to sit in terms of your overall rates taken, then your direction to executive about how you want to manage that to achieve what level you want. So,
yeah, second, or you can. Yeah.
Councillor Robson, you moved, and seconded by Councillor Arbery.
Yeah, look, it's sometimes when we look at our total operational revenue or our total operational expenditure, and ideally they should balance, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes we need to give staff direction on things we want them to focus on, or give the chief executive direction on things we want them to focus on. And it just tells them there's a priority. He, in this case, then may shift resources internally to make sure that happens. Specifically, I think it makes sense to get resource in this place. If it's additional resource in the context of the overall size of this organisation, I think it's not a significant in any sense in terms of change, but it's targeted for a particular outcome. We're seeking an outcome here where the return far exceeds the expenditure. You're not often in a situation where you get that sort of return. I have to say that in regard to UFTI and working our way through to the LTP, one of the observations I would make is that spending a appropriate sum, which should be significant on engaging with our community and getting the commitments we need through the LTP, should pay significant dividends in terms of what comes from that, in terms of our relationship with central government. This is a similar situation. It's about putting resource into a place where there's a pool of money where if we play it right, we'll get a significant return. So it's just smart investment, and it's indicating to the chief executive that we want to make that investment in this particular space. Why would one say no?
Thank you very much. Councillor Arbery.
I don't think I need to speak.
Thank you. Anyone else? So we just put the motion as you see it. The one.
the motion, as I understand it, is to include $150,000 operating costs for funding to enable an application to caring communities on behalf of the community.
Much, Council. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Abstentions? And carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, Christine.
Just a question. Oh.
I'd like to just signal when we get the further presentation, I'm happy to move a motion on our rates, basically.
So question, Christine, you mentioned that, and Paul, because we don't know the exact nature of our surplus, we can't put a dollar figure on any resolution today in terms of that surplus going into risk reserve or being utilised to lower the rates. Is that so? We can't put a number on. Is that correct? For that part of it.
That's correct. I have just emailed Robin a possible resolution that may allow that to be accommodated.
So if that's the case, we're kind of combining the reserve surplus issue with the operational expense reduction issue sort of together. Is that correct? So we've got seeking one figure if we're going to try and get to a land on a rates rise that we're happy with. Okay, thank you.
I'm assuming Robin will put the recommended motion up.
She's just getting it now.
question, I assume it includes the resolution about that Jeremy mentioned. I forget the number, but you know, in terms of shifting, overriding our existing policy to put the surplus into this, we need to include that there, don't we? Is that right? Or don't we?
Check that policy. It actually says or any other use as defined by, as approved by council. So.
I'm sure we'll want to discuss what you've put up there. If I'll just indicate, as the mover who's indicated he was going to move, that I'd be putting 4.9% in that green figure. And then we could have some discussions around that if possible. Or
Councillor Arbery.
Just a question, what would be the expected deficit or the deficit plus savings required to achieve 4.9?
So the level of saving at 4.9 is 840,000, and just under 1.2 million to get to 4.7. 4.7 is just under 1.2 million.
So it's 840 and 1.2. Christine, would you like to speak to this? Thank you.
Explain probably more for the newer councillors. So what this is basically saying is you're setting a rates level of 4.x. So Councillor Baldock signalled he moved 4.9. And what we're saying is that in the first instance we would use any rate surplus from this year. So we haven't finalised the accounts and the audits have not been done, so we don't know what the surplus is, although we're expecting a surplus. So that would be applied in the first instance. Then we try to pick up the remaining. So just for argument's sake, if it went through at 4.9, that's the 840. Apply the surplus first, then the remaining balance, we would do our best as staff to find savings through the year. And in the instance where there is still a shortfall, then we're noting that that shortfall would be debt funded, and we will report on a regular basis to the council so that you can see how we're tracking in terms of any cumulative savings. And once the annual report comes through, you'll know what the declared surplus is that can be applied to this. If there's any surplus, if the total amount of the surplus exceeds the quantum, then under the policy it would just apply to debt repayment.
Sorry, you might have to repeat that for Councillor Robson, who was distracted. You got it? Okay.
Councillor Hollis.
If it's 4.9, what does that do to commercial and residential percent?
Jim, have you got those figures? We'll just have to confirm those. The 4.7 obviously is per the document, so it's slightly higher than that. So we had a median of 1% and 11%. It'll be so it'll be 11.1. 1.1 and 11.1 would approximately, but we'll just confirm.
For the 4.9, so it's 1.1% and 11.1. Can't be 11.1 because it's gone down.
It'll just take a minute, just because of the changes to the commercial rate that came through separately today, take a little bit longer to calculate through.
Yeah, that's where they've got to. That's where we're making the adjustments. Yeah.
Folks, the calculation for the commercial differential, apropos Andrew's question, is just going to take a little while to get. So we can do one or two things. We can take a break again for 15 minutes, or do you have questions of clarification that the exec can answer?
I do want, no, talk.
Councillor Grant.
Paul or Christine or whomever, whenever we go at it, you know, as regards to the percentage, how are we going to throw that at the public for them to understand? And when I say that, it's simply this, is that many people are going to turn around and say, well, okay, Auckland's got 3.5%, what's Tauranga got? I think the most important part here is we've got to do it in two. Simply this is what the rates are for commercial and this is what is residential. What's your thoughts, or how do we go about it, Paul? Because the thing is, I want to make sure that the public understand. Because if we don't go it right, they won't.
Yeah, I might see if Susan wants to add to this comment, but one of the big things we'll use is that we will update the rates calculator as quickly as possible and promote that so people can actually see their individual impact of what the change means.
I'm just conscious too that we will put our own narrative out, but we have the press here listening to us today, and so I imagine that as a result of the debate today, you know, there'll be a story written.
Just hope the story is written right, Marty. I really. Hear that, Samantha?
Any other questions? Dr. Granger.
I'll have one. The perception monitor, what was our last score?
It's very low. So I
30,
well, in the low 30s.
Low 30s, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, you can turn it off.
I don't even know if where's the button?
So, are there any other questions, or do you want to take a break for 10, 15 minutes or so while Paul... you have? Sorry, you think...
I think I've got the answer here, but I just want to ask it so everybody hears it. So what's the total amount that we have added in by our resolutions in the last 2 days from the results of the submissions that we as elected members have added in, including, well, this won't count decisions that were already there, like fireworks, which was in dollars, not on a percentage, in the dollar amount.
Just confirm with Catherine and Tracy, but 1.17 million.
It's 840 plus the 330 executive recommendation.
Yep, so the total of the reports is 1.17.
Let's take 10 minutes, guys. Time is now, say, 5 past. Let's meet at 15:15.
speak to this. So team is still working on, so what you've got is just cleared everything else on the board, because once this is dealt with, it sort of dealt with the package. So in terms of all of the decisions you've made to date, that gets you to a 5.34% rate rise. First number is the median commercial rate rise that relates to, which is 11.3, the residential of 1.6, and 0 reductions, because that's actually your sort of baseline after all your decisions to date. So then if we just work down, so if you were to go for 4.9, that's 11% commercial, 1.3 residential. That requires a further 840,000 of reductions to get to that level. And we've just got over the side in red. If you did that, 4.9, it would mean an increase annual median for residential of $29 a year and an annual median commercial of $479. Just as a comparison, Auckland's annual median increase is 130 for residential. So just gives you a comparison. I think Jim was saying they're 4.5 or something. So 4.5, 4.5 residential, and then the 4.8 just shows you, and we're still working on 3.9, which Councillor Hollis has asked us. We're just working through those numbers, but it would be obviously lower. The team are just working on that. As soon as they've got the number, they'll put it up on the board.
All right, Councillor Baldock, you are
Yes,
the mover
I am.
of a motion.
I would move, if we could have it back up on the screen if possible, Robin, but the motion that was there before with the figure of 4.9% rate increase, please.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Cloud, thank you.
Then, and speaking to it, look, we've worked very hard the last 2 days. I actually congratulate all my colleagues and for the way we've worked together. And some of us have been through this before. For some it's a new experience, but this is where the rubber meets the road. When we get to set the rates, we have had a pretty good, respectful debate on many issues. Some we've lost, some we've won. And we're now here at the end of our deliberations. We have agreed to spend an additional 840,000 by our resolutions. We've been asked by the executive to add another 330,000 for projects that they believe were important. One of them, this last one we signed off on, which takes us to 1,170,000. We also, I just point out, I don't want to go through all the items, but we did have the opportunity of cancelling the New Year's Eve fireworks celebrations, and we decided to keep 400,000 of that budget there, which would have put it at 1,570,000, which is about a 1% rate increase. Would have taken us right up to 5.7. But because we have a surplus, we don't know the exact amount of it, but it's been indicated to be somewhere in the vicinity of 500,000. And because staff have indicated, particularly the Chief Executive has indicated, that they can assist by going through and finding other OpEx savings, and these things are indicated in the resolution, that we can sign off today on a 4.9 rate rise, which I believe is a very reasonable thing to go to our community with. Many of those projects that we brought back in were very, very worthwhile, and I believe the submitters will be happy that they have been listened to and have been supported. And given the circumstances we've been in through COVID and having to have an extended consultation period with an amended draft, we've all had to work a lot harder than we normally do on an annual plan. So I ask my colleagues to please give their support to this, always mindful of the fact that this is how we set the budget. If we vote against it, some may vote against hoping to change it to another matter, and that's a different story. But at the ultimate, when we vote against it, we're actually voting to not fund our council's operations for the year. You see that happen over in some countries where everybody stops getting paid and things stop. So we do need to settle this, and agree that compromise sometimes is what keeps governments going. And I'm satisfied personally, I won't use the we, Councillor Robson, but I am satisfied that this is a pretty good result given all that we have dealt with and having listened to the consultation through the process. I recommend the resolution to my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Baldock. Councillor Clout.
Yeah, I mean, it's been quite amazing, the process the last couple of days, and I think if we reflect on it, we have actually, I think, worked pretty well overall as a team in coming up with the initiatives and approving the many initiatives that have been brought to us by the community. And as Councillor Baldock said, 840,000 odd, we've actually added. And so we obviously have to therefore, to get the number back closer to the 4.7, have to make some other savings. Personally, I would have liked to have seen less money spent on the fireworks and also on the sustainability work to help get us a lower rates increase. But you know, along this table today, I'm sure there's many of us, in fact I would say all of us, would have certain decisions that we wish had gone the other way, but that's the process of democracy. It really shows, I think, the value of people coming in and submitting to us. I really, I continue to encourage the community to, come every time there's an opportunity to come and put their case forward for council funding, to do so, because we, in many cases, we're able to listen and respond to that. I'll remind everyone that we started this process at about 12.6% rates increase. We chopped it down to 7.6%. And now we're bringing it down, if this passes, to 4.9. So we have listened to the community's concerns about particularly the post-COVID financial situation that people are in. I'm very comfortable with the rebalancing of the residential and the commercial take. So at 4.9% overall, the residential average or median increase is 1.3% and commercial 11%. Finally, I would just want to reiterate and add that Tauranga is one of New Zealand's fastest growing cities, and we cannot continue to grow and fund the vital infrastructure and also the amenity that we want as a city without these sort of rates increases. Unfortunately, that is a fact of life, but and I don't think this is going to put people off moving to Tauranga either as a resident or bringing their business here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clout. Councillor Hollis.
I'd like to move an amendment.
Indeed.
And change 4.9 to 3.9.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Hollis and seconded by Councillor Morris. You wish to speak to the amendment?
Yeah. The reason for 3.9% at a further cost of $1.73 million, or about 0.7% of council's total spend for a year, would go an enormous way to repairing our council's very low reputation at the moment with our community. 3.9% means, I was hoping, a 0% average residential rates rise. It's come out at 0.2, but I'm happy enough with that. And it would signal that we understand the pain in our community as our unemployment is going to go up over the next few months and all of the drama that goes with that. It also brings commercial rates below 10%, which signals to our businesses that we care. $1.7 million, or about a Coolum Park, plus or minus a small amount, is the amount that we need to spend to begin showing that we care more for our current ratepayers than we do for obscenely expensive nice-to-have such as Elizabeth Street, and also for the people who are moving sometime in the future to our city, and our current ratepayers are the one that foots the bill. Growth for growth's sake is not smart, regardless of how those words are used. What this city needs is smart, thoughtful growth. And I hope my fellow councillors understand the point that I'm trying to make.
Thank you. Councillor Morris.
Yeah, thank you. I do acknowledge the change from March the 4th, in which some colleagues were sort of up in the 17% game, others came down to 12%, and then just before lockdown there was a resolution to come in at 7.6%, and finally 4.7% was adopted. To say that some people were sort of carried through down there, kicking and screaming would probably be an exaggeration. But I don't think that we, as Tauranga City Council, have responded to COVID-19 in the same way that our peer councils have, in the same way that other growth councils have around the country. I don't think that we have shown the correct level of empathy that we need to for our community. Now, I am heartened with some of the additional spend for community support that is within this budget, but that has come not at the cost of some things that should have been prioritised out, but in addition to. And so in this environment, a 4.9% rates rise would be a failure of our leadership to listen to our community. It would be a failure of our leadership to, and when I say leadership, I mean the entire council, all elected members, to prioritise. And when you look at our average wage in Tauranga, some around sort of $70,000, everybody around this table, absolutely everybody around this table is on over $100,000 a year. And I don't say that as a criticism, but I say we don't know the impact, we may not know the impact that some people are having, are feeling out there. And I think that it's entirely appropriate that this year, in response to COVID-19, we get close to a 0% residential rates rise, and we get that commercial rates rise out of double digits in response. We need to respond, and by adopting Councillor Hollis's resolution, we will be showing that we have heard and that we are responding. At present, 4.9, we're still going to give Auckland Council a great run for their money in becoming the highest rating council in New Zealand in residential terms amongst the metros. And we just don't want to go there, do we? Do we want to do that to our community? Do we need super city spending in Tauranga? I don't think so. It's not what I was elected to be here for, and I think it's important that we as politicians, we keep our promises to our community and also to each other.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Arbery, thank you.
I'll be voting against the amendment. When we think about the future, knocking off that extra, say, $1.6 million and putting it onto the credit card through debt funding, I think isn't prudent. We're already running a deficit budget. And what it leads to down the road is larger need for increase in rates during the long-term plan. We've already got a 2 to 3% increase baked in for next year due to the temporary changes we've made. Staff have already reduced operational costs by about $10 million and are going to find extra reductions for us. I think if we wanted to land at 3.9%, we should have been a bit more diligent in what we cut and decided to reduce our spending as opposed to debt funding that. So I can't support this amendment, and I haven't quite decided where I'll land yet, but it's definitely not at 3.9%.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you very much. I will be supporting the amendment. Again, like I've alluded to, we haven't yet hit the effects of COVID. We were all elected in for our community. Our community are the ones who elected us to be here sitting at this table, and what a privilege that is. What we've also asked them to do is to come and talk to us, to come and speak to us. What was the main issues that they had was a rates rise. There are some people in our community that can afford that, and absolutely hands down to them. I am so pleased for that. I'm also so pleased for a city that is wanting to be progressive, is wanting to grow, and is wanting to move forward. The past is but a thought, and the future is an illusion. We are dealing with right here, right now. And right here, right now, there are people in our community hurting. Right here, right now, there are people that are budgeting hard up until October, November, December, when the impact of COVID-19 will hit. I believe in my years of experience in always projecting, having plans for the future. Prudent, realistic, achievable plans. But if you can't live for what's right here, right now, and what's in front of us, in the face of the biggest pandemic we will have seen, I don't know what else we can do for our community. I am aware of the implications, of the future, should we not put the rates up a huge amount. I am not silly, I see that. But we need to help people now. This is desperate times for a lot of people. I know that we have said we can sell houses, we can move, that's beautiful. Not everybody can do that. There are a lot of people that have brought their houses, that do just get by, and the rates increase will hurt them. They cannot sell up and move out because now the prices have got out of touch for them. What do they do next? I don't know. I'm not going to be that person that's going to put my hand up for a rates rise when our community have asked us to be as compassionate and sympathetic as we can possibly be for right here, right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kitty. Councillor Deputy Mayor Salisbury.
I'll be speaking against this amendment. We've spent 2 days deliberating over projects that our community have requested and value. And by now trying to take 2.6 million out of our operating budget while still asking them to do all of that work for our community is unreasonable. So although I completely understand the pressure and stress that many of our residents are facing right now, we cannot now ask our staff to do all of this work as an organisation and under-resource them to do it. So I will be voting against this amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes, did I see your hand up here? No. Anybody wish to speak to the amendment? Councillor Hollis, Councillor Robson.
Yes, it's difficult, and I think, like Councillor Arbery, I'm not certain that I can go to. I'm certain I can't go to 3.9 as much, if anything, that it would be a statement that I know won't get across the line in this meeting. And we're not here to waste time. I think everyone understands the different positions. I think different elected members have different bubbles they live within. Bubbles have always existed. COVID didn't create them, and the absence of COVID doesn't get rid of them. We have particular groups, our political bases, our families, our friends, the circles we operate in. And perhaps there are groups that we're not close to, but we believe we connect to in some ways. I have a particular connection, not in this place, but in a different place, to people who live, if we like, at the bottom end. And I really struggle with the sorts of increases we're looking at here. I'm conscious, but not certain, that the sort of rates increase we're looking at is probably the highest of any metro in the country. Not certain, but I'm conscious that in other cities, to try and address the impacts of not just their income, but the expectations of their community, they have gone further and much harder than we have. Further and much harder than we have. And while I wouldn't want us to have gone as far as Auckland, who announced significant staff redundancies, I don't think we've gone as hard as we could have here in the last 2 days. And it's my view, based on my experiences, we all, as I say, work in our own bubble. But 3.9, I don't think is going to get across the line. And I'm conscious that our staff have work to do, and I'd like us to move through this as quickly as we can and get to a place where hopefully I'm comfortable. What's driving me, just to foreshadow so no one's in any doubt, is I believe there was an implicit promise to our community. There are headlines that have been put in the public domain. There is an expectation we are going to land on 4.7. I believe my reading of the community is that's their expectation. Many people are unhappy with it. The commercial community, quite rightly, are unhappy with it. But as someone who had the courage in this chamber to move the differential in UAGC vote, you know, I don't think anyone can accuse me of going to 4.7 through lack of courage. That's where I want to land. That's where I think is reasonable. That's where I think, rightly or wrongly, we've set an expectation for our community. Let's see where we go with the next amendment, but I won't be supporting this one.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes, did you want to speak? No, Councillor Granger.
Yeah, thank you. Some decisions are tough, and I've 12 years now in council. This is one of the tougher ones as well. 66 years old, very first and only pandemic that I've ever known. And people have suffered. Yes, they have. They have suffered. And our residents are asking us to assist. I'm standing on the principle here, and I'm going to give them as much assistance that I can. And I'm supporting this amendment.
Thank you. There being other speakers, Councillor Hollis, did you want to? Oh, no. Sorry? No right of reply on an amendment, I beg your pardon. So I'll just put it to...
Just briefly, I think there's many speeches being made about the hardships out there in the community, and I don't think we're unaware of that at all. But the amendment here is to reduce the rates by 2%, which is about roughly on the $29 median rate rise in the moved motion is a matter of $5, $6, $7 reduction, which is not making much difference to those in hardship. Our staff, the reason I moved what I have and why I will vote against this amendment is that our staff have already indicated that they will do everything they can to help ratepayers who come in here and indicate hardship. There will be no penalties for late payments, as there has been in the past. They will direct them to sources like the government rate rebate scheme, like WINS, who are now giving money to people who are in difficulty with paying their bills, and those bills include rate bills. So there will be help offered for those who are desperate and need help. But there are many in the city too who have not had the impacts of COVID, and it is better for us to address the people in need rather than a rate rise that doesn't address the needs of the city and keep us ready for a recovery from COVID. So I won't be supporting the amendment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bullock. I'll put the vote to you, Council. This is the amendment. All those in favour, please say aye. Can I see just a show of hands, please? Yes, record that. And those against? Thank you very much, which takes us back to the substantive motion. Councillor Robson.
I bet you no one saw this coming.
No.
Oh, it's being predictable makes one more comfortable with other people. I'd like to move an amendment, and that is that the figures be set at the same numbers that we went out with the draft AP. And I phrase it that way. People know what those numbers are, the 4.7 to 1.1. 10.8, the 1.1, the 4.7 figure. And I phrase it that way for an obvious reason. If I have a seconder, I'm happy to speak to it.
Seconded by Councillor Hollis.
Okay.
Through the chair, just need to clarify, sorry, because there's been quite a few changes from the draft. Is it just the percentage that we're confirming that is the same as... Okay.
Yeah, the figures I see up there is the figures that I'm sort of running with, but the 4.7 is the headline figure we've been out with previously. And you're speaking to it, and someone better put the clock on. Don't have a prepared speech, but there's a few points to cover here. It's a difficult situation, but the truth is, with our decisions, and let's not put it on staff, the 330 figure was us accepting a staff recommendation, as we've done in many other places. The increase from the original 4.7 to the, as we currently sit, 5.34 is on us, not on staff. So that increase of 1.17 is on us. It's our collective decision making. I believe that it's been indicated to us by the very staff that we claim to work with, we need to work with, and will be responsible for executing the decisions we make as effectively and efficiently as possible in line with the Local Government Act, that they have indicated to us that they can deliver what we want inside that 4.7. Why would I go to my community in the current situation and ask for more? And I do stand to be corrected. I haven't had a chance to do the research, but I do believe that 4.7 puts us, and I'll use words that others are happy to use, at the bold end of the spectrum, at the courageous end of the spectrum, at the it's a doing the right thing end of the spectrum. But we don't need to go too far. We've had a clear indication, as clear as we can possibly get, from our staff that 4.7 is doable. We've indicated that figure to our community. We've made some decisions, and they're by democracy, and some people have won some and lost some. We've all won some and lost some, if you want to phrase it that way. But I don't believe it should be seen that way. I don't believe it should be seen in terms of winning and losing. I think it should be seen as good people working as hard as they can to fight for the things that they believe are in line with their community. In other words, I believe there's 11 people here trying to uphold the oath they swore to the city. It's just we have a different views on what those things mean. And I believe that we can unite around 4.7, and I believe that we can deliver a vote of 11 people around 4.7. And given where we've been over the last few months since October the 12th, I believe that, in addition to the number, a unanimous resolution around 4.7 would be a sign that we're getting to a better place, that we're moving in the right direction. And that's why I urge my colleagues to vote for this amendment, please.
Councillor Robson, Deputy Mayor Salisbury, followed by Councillor Arbery. Councillor Hollis.
Yeah, cheers for that. I'll be a lot short. Oh, sorry. I'll be a lot shorter than that. We know 10 million has already been trimmed. What we're asking for is another 1 million, which takes it from a 5% trimming of spend to 5.5%. And I think it's entirely doable to trim a further $1.17 million, which won't quite get the result that I was hoping for, but it's still a pretty good result for the community.
Councillor Hollis, back to Deputy Mayor Salisbury. I beg your pardon, Heidi, I didn't see you. Thank you.
I'll be supporting this amendment. I realise I've really enjoyed hearing from the community. I feel really proud that we've been able to add
some very small amounts to some organisations that can make a lot of difference in our community on a ground level. The food bank, some of the social services, Enviro Hub, some of the little groups that really work hard in our community along the way. And I also recognise that we aren't, for the lowest income people, this isn't going to be a rise. This is going to keep them safe. I recognise too that this is not going to be easy on our staff, and I really like to truly thank our staff for all the work that they do, and I know that this setting at this rate is going to be challenging, but as Andrew said, it's going to be possible, and it's going to be possible to unite us under this. Also, I really feel like we did go out to the community with this rate. We heard this rate, and they fed back on this rate. And I'm in my mind, if we go up another 2%, then we're going back to them. It's a small amount, but we're saying to them we're going to keep rafting things up. So I'm really happy with this. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Hughes. Deputy Mayor Salisbury, and then Councillor Arbery.
I think we've heard a lot of comparisons with other cities, and I don't believe that's particularly helpful for us. And I think we have been listening to our community, and I'm too thrilled with the things that we have been able to put into this annual plan, actually, that will benefit our community. I mean, we're not like every other city. We face different challenges, and we have different opportunities. So I think what we have to do as a city is vital to getting us through this hard time together, and we have a role in leading through this time with wisdom and with prudence and with empathy. And so I also agree that with this rate, we can achieve what we're asking our staff to do without putting undue pressure on the organisation to do this. So I too will be supporting this amendment.
Very much. Councillor Arbery.
I will be supporting this amendment. It's slightly ironic that we asked the staff to find us savings. They identified a range of saving options for us. We've voted on some of those options and decided to include a lot of them and bumping up the rates, but now we're asking them to bring it back down elsewhere. So slight irony there, but I think I struggle with the idea of borrowing from our future selves to get the rates down now because this will bump up the rates in the long-term plan. But then at the same time, we do have a small fraction more balance sheet capacity that does allow that to happen for us. I would just also remind people that the people struggling the most in our city generally are those who have seen rent increases of double-digit amounts every year for since early 2000s, basically. So if someone's paying $400 a week now for a two-bedroom unit as the market level rent, which is an extra $100 compared to 3 years ago. So when we're looking at a residential rates rise of $29 a year, that was 4.9%, so it'll be slightly less for the 4.7, so just under $25 a year. That's quite reasonable for residents, and I think that is an affordable level to land at given all our other pressures. And the large jump in the commercial sector, in my mind, they've had discounted rates for many years now. So those savings, that's money in the bank for them. So it's unfortunate that we're putting up their rates this year in a recessionary environment, but it is just playing catch up. So overall, I'm happy to support the 4.7, but this whole business of setting a rate is quite complex. There's a lot of different factors, and it causes a lot of cognitive dissonance, really.
Councillor Morris, followed by Councillor Clout.
Thank you. We've had some great debate over the last couple of days, and I've enjoyed hearing the diverse views around the table. Diverse views are important to me. and I have enjoyed that, so I thank colleagues for that. In terms of the 4.7, it is what Council went out for, consultation, and whilst that's not an explicit promise, there is an implicit promise in there, in my view. And so with the environment that we're in, post-COVID-19, to go out higher than that with the actual would be a mistake in my view, and not be showing the required level of empathy with our community that we need to. And we do need to enhance the reputation of this council in this city, which is very low. And this will go, keeping our implicit promise here, I think goes some way, even just a small way, to helping that. It goes to that often heard phrase that I hear from certain people: don't make promises you can't keep. So don't go out with 4.7 if you can't come back with 4.7. And so I think it's important that we do that. In terms of future generations, well, obviously we had a briefing organised by Mayor Powell with Shamabeel Ikub, who talked about the importance of using balance sheet in times like this. Of course, we have not used our balance sheet to the level that our peers have, and there are reasons for that, but we haven't. And it's a good thing, because if not now, when? It's important. And if we are actually taking a long-term view, you need to think about the intergenerational stress that certain events have and the consequences that COVID-19 is going to have on the generations coming forward. Now, I'm not going to be so bold as to suggest that Tauranga City Council's setting of the rate today will echo in eternity, but I would suggest that 4.9% would be unleashing hell, if people can get the... there's a movie reference in there somewhere, folks, if you get that. But no, I think that, yeah, the last couple of days we've added expenditure there, and our Chief Executive, I have absolute confidence in, will be able to work and get us down to 4.7%, just looking at 0.5% of our operating revenue, operating expenditure, noting there is a small deficit there. But he can do it. The team can do it. 0.5% of our operational spending. Easy stuff. Well, not easy stuff, but I have confidence that they can do it, and we can go out to our community in a reasonable place. So I do support it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morris. Moving to Councillor Clout, followed by Councillor Granger.
Yeah, look, the old 747 of Tauranga City Council have come into land, and the wheels are down, and we're just about there. So I'm very excited that we are just about there. Not too much turbulence, I'm pleased to say. Look, I'm very confident that our CE and staff can squeeze that extra 330 odd thousand out of it, out of the budget, and I think, you know, if we can get this this 4.7 into land, then and if we can all agree on it in a unanimous decision, I think that's a really good step forward for this council and a really good signal to our wider community. So I do commend the 4.7. I think we can show the flexibility that we need if we can all get to that point. Thank you.
Councillor Clout, Councillor Granger.
Thank you. Am I going to support this amendment? You guys can wait.
The suspense.
First of all, I'd like to thank the staff for your assistance, and certainly the time that you've all spent, especially over these last few weeks. I'd also like to thank my colleagues and the Mayor, and the reason why is simply that we're certainly quite a diverse group, but these last few days, to me, I think we've just shown respect for one another and one another's point of views. I think it's been fantastic, and I'll tell you something in regards to the history that I shared at this place. I enjoyed these last few days. So coming back to, am I going to
support that amendment. Yes, I am. Yes, I will support the 4.7. There was a few of us that tried our best to do it 3.9. And we did try, but that's okay. We had to face reality, and that reality all of a sudden was John Robson. Quite amazing when he came about and what he did, but he did. But I do support the 4.7%. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Granger. Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Mayor. I will support 4.7% if this amendment goes through, because I believe a unanimous decision on the rates is a very important thing to do. But I didn't move the original motion at 4.9 because I believed 4.7 was okay. It does require another 400,000 in cuts in spending. And I listened to speeches about being bold and brave and so on. There was $400,000 on offer through one item that we wanted to keep. So we can't keep squeezing the organisation to deliver up more and more. But I do believe they will find a way. We have some of the best team, I think, in the country. I don't accept the argument that we have to go out, that we have to sign off on the rate we go out and consult with. That's patently ridiculous. Auckland didn't sign off on a rate they went out to consult on. I don't think there are many councils that do, because we listen to submissions and we make adjustments and we end up with what we think is the right thing to do. And I think we have done a good job here in addressing all those issues. I'll let the matter be put to vote, and then we'll get to the substantive motion, whatever that turns out to be, and we'll sign off and go and have drinks, I think.
Thank you. Councillor Kitty, sorry.
Thank you. And first of all, I'd like to thank the staff and my colleagues here. It has been an interesting journey and one of great learnings, and I'm sure, like I've said, this is a 3-year training, and I'm sure there's a lot to learn. I can't support this just for the mere fact that I have heard the people in my community who do not want a higher rates rise. There are some decisions we've made here, and I am so happy that everyone is passionate in their certain areas, which I think is absolutely amazing. However, there have been some decisions that I think we could have cut back on that could have made this rates lower with less pressure on our staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just to finish off before it goes back to the vote, I will support this, but before that, I also wanted to thank the staff. On the 22nd of July, this team, the executive team, would have been together 1 year. That's all. And I think that needs to be recognised in the team that they are, the support that they give us, and the work that's been done across this extremely challenging period during and post-COVID-19. And while we are not any different to any other council or any other place in New Zealand, having this young team do the work that we all know they've done. And I'm thinking specifically around the work that many did on the submissions for the CIP fund, which we remain hopeful. I mean, there is a saying, no news is good news. We still remain hopeful, but it was great. And so thank you all for all that you've done. And yep, I will get to the staff for all that. And the staff as well in support of the executive team. Thank you for being with us over this journey, this particular journey, this last 24 hours, but all that you do to support us. Jeremy, this green sheet has been amazing. Thank you very much. And Coral and Robin and all the team, Raj. Yep, so it's a collective thank you to all of you who are here. Samantha, thanks for sticking with us 2 days. Bill's happy to edit your column whenever you're ready, so pass it across to him. Speaking to the substantive motion, Councillor Kitty earlier on said that we need to be sort of focused in the now, and she's right. And the challenge, of course, is that the now is a very challenging and somewhat ugly now on a whole lot of levels, not just with COVID, but with the decisions that we've got to make at this time. And I worry hugely that that Tauranga lacks, as I've said, I'm not going to give a speech from the pulpit so much as just to repeat something that I've said many times, is that Tauranga lacks amenity, it lacks facilities, it lacks services that other cities and other cities, much smaller than us have. And I wonder why that is. I wonder how that's come to be. And I just hope that going forward, we can, we've got the vision and we've got the courage to take the city forward, and I believe we do. So just to end this, I'd just like to thank you all, my colleagues, my councillors. We've had a good 2 days together. It's been a tough 2 days in many respects, but I commend you for your thought processes, what you bring to the party here, so to speak, and for the way that we've all got on. It's been a great 2 days in many respects, and I hope we can move the city forward as a consequence. So, with that in mind, putting the amendment to you, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? So, 1 against, otherwise 10-4, which takes us back to the substantive motion. 10-1. 10-1. Yeah. What did I say?
10-4, buddy.
Cool. So I was channeling Marty from his police days. Sorry. It's a substantive motion.
All right, speaking to the substantive motion, firstly, thank you for supporting the amendment, but I got the feeling you were all there ahead of me anyway. There is an issue around the amenity in this city, and there's a big debate coming up in the LTP. So the 4.7, the substantive motion, I think is the right motion, but it doesn't address the underlying issues in this city, right, which are significant. And I hear people say we mustn't compare ourselves with other cities, and then I hear other people say we don't have the amenity that other cities have. And I try and reconcile those two positions and think, obviously they come from people who are politically opposed in every respect, because they can't both be true. And then what I do is I give pause to the evidence of why we lack the amenity of other cities. And why we lack the amenity of other cities is because for years, councils in this place, in my view, have succumbed to a trickle-down, market-led approach to running what effectively is a social enterprise, a city, right? They've allowed the city plan to be market-led, and that's one of the things that's gutted our CBD. They have allowed the growth strategy to be driven by people who, as Adam Smith, I won't give you the quote because it's inappropriate to read from it, but please read Adam Smith. They've allowed the growth strategy of this city to be driven by a small, narrow band of vested interests. They've allowed a situation to exist where, compared to other cities, we have effectively a $50 million annual hole in revenue. They have allowed a situation where by 2030, this city will have done, through the decisions of its councillors, $1 billion in foregone revenue. I kid you not. By 2030, this city will have foregone $1 billion in revenue through the choices of the councillors of the times have made. And if you want to know why the city doesn't have amenity, then think about what we could have had for $1 billion. I just want to leave you with that thought. I commend the substantive motion to my colleagues.
Thanks very much, Councillor Robson.
If there are no other speakers.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock.
I've never been more tempted in my life. But I'm going to conclude with only one comment.
You want a drink, Larry?
I will support the amended motion, the substantive motion, happy in the knowledge that the next time Mayor Temby has to return to the Papamoa Residents Ratepayers Association, he may have Councillor Morris standing alongside him, and he won't have to defend the fact that we ended up with a rate rise higher than what we went out on. Of course, we should not compare ourselves with other cities. What we do is compare ourselves with the way other cities set their rates. and the way they set their differentials and the way they set their UAGCs, but we ought not to. We need to do what we have to do for the city, and I hoped we might have had a unanimous decision, but we'll have to see as we put the final vote. But again, I would conclude, and the Mayor made the best speech before, but look, it's just been a great 2 days. I agree with Bill. This is probably one of the better annual plans I've been through in my years. Perhaps it's a foundation which we can build on and move forward on as we direct the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Larry. Councillors, I'll put the vote to you. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Any abstentions? The vote is carried. Thank you very much. Do we need it? Is there anything else? Do we need to go to...
We just need to close the meeting.
Oh, I can... what about...
Yep, we can close the meeting.
I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.